I'd like to call to order the December 12th, 2022 special city council meeting. Chair will call the roll. The clerk will call the roll.
Finnegan.
Here.
Gas.
Here.
Flora.
Here.
Matani.
Here.
Bradbury.
Here.
Gage.
Here.
Kistler.
Here.
We're all here. Please join us in the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looking ahead at the Ketchikan City Council would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of this land in Ketchikan, the Tongass Tlingit people. Now, looking ahead at communications, we do have a budget update that requires a motion. It's general government budget update number 6, addition of a 2023 wastewater capital project, Peterson Street Sewer Main Rebuild. Chair will entertain a motion.
Honor, I move the city council amend the 2023 general government operating and capital budget by increasing the wastewater division's capital improvement program to add the Peterson Street Sewer Main Rebuild project and increasing the infrastructure account number 730.00 to 235,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Ms. Bradbury, then.
Could we get just a general update real quick? I didn't have time to go in depth on the budget updates with how late we got them.
Mayor, councilors, this is the discussion we had with the Public Works Director at the last meeting, talking about Peterson Street. Essentially, what happened is that surface is gone. It used to be asphalt and it's down to gravel at this point. So since we have to redo the street, now's the time to go in and rebury those lines and take care of the water and wastewater lines. They are susceptible to freezing. And since we have to tear it up, it's best to not have to do a pavement cut later on down the road.
Mr. Thomas.
I have the same question.
In the good old days, we used to always just go in, put the pavement up, and then tear it up. Further discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Bradbury.
Yes.
Flora.
Yes.
Gas.
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Kistler.
Yes.
Matani.
Yes.
Gage.
Yes.
Motion passes. Moving on to persons to be heard. Assuming no one signed up. Did anyone in the audience want to address the council tonight on any subject? Okay. Moving right on to unfinished business, resolution number 222867, adopting the budget for the year 2023, appropriating from the general government funds for the fiscal year, and deferred from November 30th, 2022 meeting. So I believe we ended at ports and harbors. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So we will hear from the ports and harbors director.
Got these two at least.
Those will talk, those are KPU.
So we'll talk about
We'll
later.
talk- yeah.
Okay.
We'll talk about, if we get to KPU, we can do them.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Gerald over 5 Port Harbors. So starting with Abbas, is that right? My name.
Oh, Abbas.
Habas?
Oh my God.
Habas, Habas.
New England accent. So we're requesting a 5.6% increase from the previous 2022 budget in harbors. On our FTEs, we have 5.2 FTEs in the harbor department, and how that works. So if you don't know, we have 10 full-time employees across both port and harbors, 9 of which are shared, and then 1 is dedicated to ports. So, and you'll see there's some shared expenses on both budgets because of that. So. Significant changes on the harbor. I think the harbor is fairly status quo from reviewing, previous budgets. I do with 2 exceptions. One is the training and education line, and that's 600.03 on your budget. And we're asking for an additional $2,795. And that's due to the fact that we're hosting the Alaska Association of Harbor Masters and Administrators Conference in September. And so what that does, it brings about 150 folks to town from 51 community members, or member communities, excuse me. And And so that would be an opportunity for all 10 of our staff to attend at least a portion of the week-long conference. Obviously, they can't go to the whole thing, but typically we send 2 people. Like the last one was supposed to be Nome and then do the crisis in Nome. It was moved to Anchorage. So again, that's just to take advantage of the fact that we're hosting. And you'll see a similar shared expense on the port side too. And then the other one is computers, printers, and copiers. And you'll see there's an increase there, and that's due to the standard replacement schedule by IT. And again, you'll see the same increase within the port side of the budget on that. So, and then if I can just touch upon CIPs on the harbor, that's okay. So our number one priority on the harbor is the maintenance dredging Bar Harbor North. And as some of you, excuse me, some of you may remember, we had to do 2 budget transfers this year for emergency dredging, and we actually robbed Peter to pay Paul. We actually took that money out of the piling replacement CIP, which is in this budget as well. And then the second is our Bar Harbor North concrete rehab project, and that's going to go over several seasons. That's all done in-house. This is just material costs for the concrete. That's 40 years old on the harbor, so it's time. The flip side of that, I know we were looking for places to cut budget, and we have cathodic protection on the harbor as well as the port, but I would say, we could defer the cathodic protection on the harbor side for now. I think that would be reasonable. I mean, it'd be nice to do. We can't defer things continuously, but I would feel comfortable, at least on the harbor side, we can defer that if needed. And then piling replacement, we need to keep that. Pilings have gone up to, they're about $15,000 per piling. And so, you see a number there, but that's not, plus $15,000 for mobilization and demob. So it's like 4 pilings. So we'd like to keep that. And then another area where potentially Bar Harbor South ramp to Trestle. I feel comfortable in deferring that because I'd like to look into that more. I've looked at the paperwork and the engineering, and I'm confident we could defer that as well. So again, if you're looking for areas, I would encourage that one. So, and then with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'll try to answer them on the
Mr. Patel.
harbor side.
Thank you, Daryl, for what you're doing. First question, are you fully staffed?
We are fully staffed at the port.
Okay, now the piling replacement, can you live without it for this year?
We could live without a portion of it. It's just, there was a study done, and then, we had a survey done on the pilings, and I think they replaced about 12 pilings in the harbor, but then after that was over, we lost 2 more pilings. So at least I'd like to keep a small contingency in there. And again, they're 15,000 per piling plus the mobilization. So, whatever the council felt was appropriate. I just like to keep a small buffer in there. It's an emergency situation really, so a contingency. So.
Mr. Patel.
Your Honor, I'd like to make an amendment to defer the piling replacement by, reduce the piling replacement by 30,000 to defer the cathodic protection of 25,000 and to defer the Bar Harbor South Ramp to Trestle Repair Phase 2 by 60,000.
Can I ask a question on that? Can we separate those to separate motions?
You can split the question.
Yeah, I'd like to split the question.
Actually, first of all, is there a second?
Second.
Now you may split the question. Do you want to split it 3 ways or 4?
Yeah, just the 3 different items.
Yeah, let's do it 3 ways.
Did you second it? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Ford. Second.
So your first motion then would be to,
Reduce the piling to 30,000
okay,
and defer the cathodic protection of 25,000 and South Ramp Trestle Repair Phase 2 by 60,000.
Schedule.
Which pilings are we looking at possibly having to replace?
In Bar Harbor North specifically,
And that's the,
the steel. So there's a lot of still wooden pilings
Yeah.
and replacement with steel pilings. And again, they've done a project before. I think they replaced like a dozen.
and you're looking at possibly having to do 4?
We don't have specifically. We're trying to keep a contingency because the last time they were outside the scope of the survey, so they didn't know they needed to be replaced until it correctly fell over. So I hate to be in that situation again. So I mean, it's again, Bar Harbor's about 40, going on 40 years old. So.
Mr. Finnegan, then Ms. Bradbury.
You characterized the situation with the pilings as an emergency situation. You want this contingency in place. Would roughly $30,000 be sufficient to do that contingency?
I think it would. I think it would for now.
Thank you.
Ms. Bradbury.
Are any of these projects have grants available? I know they're focusing a lot on harbors recently, so.
Yeah, we don't have any active grants right now. We do on the port, on our CIP, but
Yeah.
not on the harbor at the current time, so.
Or is there any intention of going out for?
There is, we just finished up our grant work actually this summer. So we had two ramp projects and some pump out stations that were on the grant. So we finally finished those and closed those grants out. But I'm anxiously anticipating a new grant writer. So, or grant writers for the city.
So follow up, Yana. So if we take it off the CIP and then there is grant opportunities, does that limit what we could go out for, or can we bring it back and go out for grants or?
Yeah, that's just. Councilor Bradbury, I'll just say a couple things about harbor grants. So the city has typically taken advantage of harbor grants that are available through the state. That may be another channel for grants for infrastructure funds that are being funneled federally through the state. A lot of those grants are matching grant programs. So while we could eliminate the CIP, that doesn't leave us with the match that's required for those grants. So I would caution the council from getting rid of the CIPs in their entirety, not knowing what the matching grant component might be.
But if I can follow, that's what it sounds like you're alluding to, that we have to make sure it's in the CIP in order to be eligible.
Mhm.
And is that the question? To make sure
Yeah,
we
I
have
just
something
noticed
in there.
for other grant things that have brought forward, you've said it has to be
Yep.
in here or we can't apply for it. So I'm wondering if this is another situation where maybe we reduce it, 50%. So it's in there as a placeholder, but yet not necessarily full. I don't know. Just
And to that end, if you do reduce it, you want to push out the money to other years. You don't want to eliminate it. If that makes sense.
Right, that was wondering.
Defer, yeah.
Yeah, can I hear, because I thought one said to cut, or was that just half?
I said one is half the
Okay,
piling replacement.
okay. I heard cut and I was going, where?
so which one's on the floor right now?
The piling,
The piling.
the piling.
I didn't see.
The piling,
62 to
60 to
30.
30.
Okay.
Your Honor, I just wanted to add one other thing with respect to the harbor capital improvement projects. And the Port and Harbors Director can correct me if I'm wrong. Most of these are really about maintenance and deferred maintenance. And a lot of grant projects don't necessarily address ongoing maintenance and repair. It's really about expansion. It's about new infrastructure. So while there may be grants available, oftentimes they're really not applicable to the types of capital improvements that we're looking at right here.
And that is, and I think almost probably 90% of our CIPs are deferred maintenance projects, so.
So technically, even if we hold the money in this place, doesn't mean we're using it, correct? But it's a placeholder. If something were to happen,
Right.
we have the funds.
Further discussion on the reduction. Mr. Guest.
Not a question, but more a comment. I guess I'm a little more hesitant on this one, and not to get too off topic, but one thing I hear in the community a lot is, oh, all the council ever cares about is the tourism. We never do anything for the fishing industry. And so then I ask myself, well, what can we do as the city or as the council to help the fishing industry? And really, I think the most important thing we could do is provide adequate and up-to-date harbors. And so I'm a little hesitant to cut on these needed maintenance position or items. I think taking the advice of the harbor master, it looks like the trestle one, he said they could really do without, but on these two, I think I'm gonna be in favor of not reducing it, actually.
Further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Flora,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Gas,
No.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
No,
Bradbury,
No.
Isler.
Yes.
That passes.
Motion passed. Oh, second item? Athletic protection,
But that's deferring the entire 25.
Yeah, deferring the entire 25,000.
yes, this is to defer. Mr.
A
Fuller,
question for the harbor master, ports and harbor director. So if it's 25,000 this year, what does it turn into next year if we put it off?
On cathodic protection?
Yeah.
I think this, I mean, I don't want, I hate to advocate to not give me money, but to be transparent, I think those are fairly new pilings that we're talking about for cathodic protection. So I think we'll be good. Again, I don't want to defer this for years and years, but 1 year for looking for room is appropriate. I think it's going to be fine, but again, if it's 2 and 3 and 4 years, then we're going to run into a problem, so.
we'll be looking for the same room next year, though. I mean, 1 year suddenly becomes 10.
Right,
Keep that in mind.
right.
Yeah, well, so while I absolutely appreciate you coming prepared to wheel and deal with us, as it were. I think on this one, I kind of agree with Mr. Gass. I think we should leave this in here because we often find ourselves talking about capital projects that we've deferred, and we're really good at that. So I don't think I'll be back with this one.
Further discussion on athletic protection to next year.
Is it possible to do this cathodic protection in phases, or is this one, does it all have to be done at one time, kind of? Is it cheaper to do it all?
It's probably cheaper to do it all at one time, just because you're buying at a certain price. And we've had discussion with other folks, and so when we talk about cathodic protection, we're talking about sacrificial anodes that go on those. And those have increased in price by 200% in the last year. And so the longer you defer, the more expensive it gets. I guess that's part of deferred maintenance, right? It never gets cheaper. So I just keep that in mind too. So if you buy in bulk, you get a better price. So.
Further discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Kistler,
No.
Bradbury,
No.
Gage,
No.
Matani,
Yes.
Gas,
No.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Flora.
No.
Motion fails.
Fails 5-2.
Motion fails. And the third part. Mr. Tony, what was the third?
The Bar Harbor South Ram 2
That's right.
trestle repair, phase 2,
Okay,
Then hold them out.
deferred
deferred to next year.
to next year.
Mr. Fuller.
Daryl, what's the basis for you to want to restudy this project again?
I mean, I've looked at the report, and I mean, just speak perfectly honest, I'm not convinced we need to do the work that's recommended.
Okay.
I mean, that's the honest answer. I'm not saying we don't, but I can't say definitively to you here, yeah, we have to do it, or, so that's why I made the recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion? Okay.
If you were to look further into this, would you need any funds to help with another study, or is that something you guys can do in-house?
We can do it in-house.
Okay.
Clerk will call the roll.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
Kistler,
Yes.
Flora.
Yes.
And it passes. Okay, other questions? Harbor Director / Post Director. Very good. I guess then we will go on reports. Don't relax too much.
Oh, I'm not.
Easy peasy.
That's fine. So, from the port side, we are looking for an increase of 10.5% from the previous budget. But I do want to preface that by saying, if you compare the 2023 budget request to the last pre-COVID budget, so the 2020 budget that was prepared in 2019, this budget is 4.3% increase from what was approved in 2020. And so many of the increases on the port budget are just getting the port back to where it should be. Because, be honest with you, the 2022 budget was inadequate for the port. So if you look at what was approved and what was amended, you'll see many of our costs are the amended budget. And it's at no fault of anybody, right? We didn't know. You came off 2 years of COVID, but we came back stronger, I think, than people anticipated. We're just gonna come back even stronger next year. So anyway, I preface that with that statement I just made. So, and then as far as significant changes, I just want to bring up two, and they're fairly small. One is travel business, so 600.01. That was an increase of, these are large percentages, but they're really not large amounts in the big picture. So anyway, travel business, we asked for an increase, and that's for a share of the Alaska Association of Harbor Masters and Port Administrators, and to man a booth at the Seattle Boat Show, which they've done in the past. We haven't done it for several years for obvious reasons, and how that works is that the association rents a booth, and then we send folks and they man the booth for the time, and they attend conferences. And I think there's 8 communities out of the 51 that have volunteered, if it's approved, they go man the booth in Seattle. And that's really our only direct marketing tool to promote the harbors outside of Alaska for Ketchikan and the port as well, but for us personally, I mean, I know there's other avenues. So anyway, I throw that out, and then the second item.
Next one. What would be the advantage of promoting? What are we gaining out of that?
Well, a lot of it's networking. So we said, over 50,000 people attend the Seattle Boat Show, and for instance, this year we had the highest rate of transient vessels of any port in Alaska or any harbor in Alaska. We had 1,413 transient vessels, and that was in the top 10 on the entire West Coast. So we had a lot of folks from down south that came up here. So it's just a time to engage with folks and share in the community. And then also there's some small cruise operators that go to the boat shows as well. So.
Wouldn't that better be placed underneath the harbors, since it's mostly for the harbors versus the port?
Well, as I said, it benefits both, and there is a small portion on the harbor budget that covers that. We can split it, not evenly, of course. Most of the costs on the budget for port and harbor was split either 60-40 or 70-30, and so we split this one. I don't remember the percentage, but there's a little bit on the harbor side as well.
Still follow through with my statement. I think it should be on the harbors versus ports.
And then the second point is the salvage and disposal of impounded property. So that line item is 620.01, and actually that should be removed. So that was put there on error. After we saw it, I was like, I don't know where that came from. So I'm sure it was my fault, and I'll take the blame. But we don't need that. I think the last time they've used that line item maybe once in the last 8 years. So there certainly shouldn't be an increase, and there's rarely a reason that we dispose of impounded property on the port. We do on the harbor side.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, we do on the harbor side.
Of course, they could leave a cruise ship here. Then we can really,
You could start in a hotel.
That's right.
Come on, that would be ideal.
Yeah, we need
That'd be ideal.
Low income housing.
Yeah.
Transient housing.
literal transient. Yeah.
But realistically, we don't need that on that side of the house, and I vetted this through the entire staff, and so I really don't know how we even ended up on there. Again, I'm responsible, so it's blame, but you can cut it. So, and that's for that. And then if I could mention CIPs on the board.
Listen,
And if you look at the CIP, so our number one priority, obviously, birth 3 expansion, had meetings on that, and everyone should be aware of that, I would hope. I do want to point out that there's $2.5 million of grant money there that expires in 2024. So that project is shovel ready, and I'd love to see it move forward. So
us too.
I'm sure. And then
When does it expire?
2024. And then the berth 1 and 2 corrosion protection, that is a 2024 project. Just so you know, we did reach out and we got a new quote. So we are planning, and we can do it in-house. We are going to do a new dive survey and an engineering study, because 2016 studies just, we can't work off that. And it's going to cost us $53,000, but I think it's well worth the money before we invest even a larger sum. So that'll take place in the next year.
So is that a comprehensive sub-service?
It is. And then I also requested that they give a phased-in project schedule rather than, hey, we need to do cathodic protection. Well, what do we do first? What do we do second? Because I can't honestly tell you. So, I mean, I could make it up, but I'm not going to. So, So that'll happen. And then berth 3 tender barge upgrade. And that's where the smaller cruise ships tie up, like Uncruise and Nat Geo. And I would like to defer this, mostly because I disagree with the engineering on that. I don't think the design that is planned on there, and it isn't any better than what's already there. They're just moving the spots where they're gonna tie up ships. So I really think that needs better luck. And we might reach out again outside or not, but I'm not sure that's a good use of money for the project. So, again, I've had the discussion with the staff and actually some of the operators, and yeah, I think we can defer that. I'm not happy with it. And then berth 4 cathodic protection. That actually comes out of the repair and replacement fund, and we painted, that's part of the berth 4 lease. So that money is coming out of R&R funds that we contribute to annually. And that's part of their scheduled maintenance on their exhibit. I think as a replacement schedule on exhibit E of the lease. So that's where that money would come from. And that would actually be in-house, because our maintenance folks think they can actually install those zincs, and they're huge zincs, but they think they can do it themselves, and it still would just be the cost of the zincs. So, which I'm very impressed with, so. Not the zincs, the staff. And then lastly, the Yokohama slide attachment modification. And the Yokohamas, you probably all know, but they're the giant black rubber bumpers on the port the ships rest against. And if I was speaking on November 30th, I was going to say, you can defer that project. But in the last 2 weeks, we've lost 4 Yokohamas. One totally off the port, lodged underneath, and luckily didn't drift away because they're $30,000 a piece. Another broke on one end, and the other 2 hung up. So what I would say is I would be, if you're looking for cuts, I would be happy to reduce that, not happy, but I'd offer to reduce that, but not defer. And I would say reduce it by half, because I think in the interim, I think we need to just go through and replace a lot of hardware, shackles, chains, and because I think this was a well-intended project, but I think it was focused at all. We have 30 Yokohamas on the port, and traditionally I look back, meaning I ask people to look back smarter than me. And in the last 10 years, it's been the same 5 to 6 locations. So I think we just need to do modification on 5 or 6 locations and not 30. So in the interim, I would say, if you're looking for a cut, I would cut that in half, and we could take care of the shackles and new chains on those until we came up with a better plan.
Daryl, what's the replacement timeline on those?
I don't know, because you be honest with you, because you can't just call and talk to someone.
Right.
It's
I'm thinking
if you have to ask, you don't need it apparently.
I'm
yeah.
thinking if we put those off a year and then we suddenly need them, it might be another year out.
Yes, yeah, I
think that's-
honestly can't tell you, so, yeah, it could be. I would guess that's probably the case.
My memory is it takes a while.
So, yeah. Okay, so that is CIP, so from there,
Questions, Mr. Maton?
you give it a shot.
Errol, you're fully staffed.
We are.
Okay, can you just explain 645.04, the 2,420,000?
That's the berth 4 lease, and
Oh,
it is dependent on the number of passengers.
Okay.
So you can see in 2021, it was 1.8 million, because that was the minimum lease payment. And we factored in what we think is going to be a great year, but because we have to have the costs there available. But in all likelihood, if we're more like this year, it'll be more like the 1.82 million. So we need the budget there in case there are more passengers. There's thresholds at 820,000. And then another jump at, I think, 900.
it's a
So
fantastic lease. I love it.
everybody loves it.
No comment.
So,
That thing glares out.
Oh, yep, yeah.
well written.
It especially glared out in 2020.
Thank you for the clarification, because that glared right out at me.
Perfect.
On that, just to make sure I understand, the Word Cove passengers that are dropped downtown are not included in that, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and the base payment is 1.8
1.8 million.
change, okay.
Mr. Maton?
635.13, marketing services, 178,500.
35. Oh, marketing services, that's the KVB.
That's outgoing.
That will be reduced based on fiscal action.
Other questions for Daryl?
I'd like to make a motion to defer the Earth 3 tender barge upgrade.
Second.
Move to second, discussion. Just so I understand, there's no physical reason that we don't have, I mean, we don't do that work, right? I mean, in terms of
No.
anything happening in the next couple of years.
We have weather restrictions on that section done by an engineering study, I think Mark Hilson put through, and it's a good study, but no.
Okay.
Continue operating.
Once again, I don't want to discover that we don't have use of that in 2024 or something. I mean, we would hear about it. Discussion to defer that item. Clerk will call the roll.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
Kistler, Flora,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Amendment passes.
Yeah.
Mr. Vitale.
635.02. Janitorial services that's, for passengers coming out of Ward Cove using the bathrooms. Are they giving us any funds towards that?
They are. We made an arrangement with them, and they did this year as well. So what we did is we contacted them, and for this budget, it was much easier to one contract on city property than ours and theirs. And so they agreed to cover everything over what we normally pay. And they honored that agreement this year in 2022, and I have every confidence they'll do it in 2020.
Thank you.
Actually, Mr. Gasper.
I move to reduce the Yokohama slide attachment modification project from $50,000 to $25,000.
Second.
Move to second, discussion. Ms. Bradbury.
I'm gonna have to not vote on that or vote for that just because if we don't have those fenders, nothing can tie up. So I think it's important if we want to ensure it's kind of like having a bollard, you kind of need that, or something to tie up to. So if we don't have these, or if let's say we get a really wicked storm in April and more than the 5 or 6 break, and we don't have anything, that could mean that ships are going to be bypassing or having to go to Ward Cove or Anchor. Just either way, we would lose funds if they're not tied up. So I'm just a little hesitant to do anything with that in case, just with also the shipping, lovely shipping, our supply chain right now and shipping. So
Mr. Ford.
I agree with Councilmember Bradbury for the reasons as stated, and for another reason I keep bringing up, put it off for a year. Next year, it's gonna be more. And if we would have asked Earl on November 30th, he didn't need any of it. 2 weeks later, he needs half. So I think the community's best served if we just leave that one alone.
Ms. Gage.
I think, I'm gonna agree with Bradbury on this, but could we also look at, if we replace all the parts and then, you could always do that anyway and just leave the funds on here.
We could.
Yeah, but then we also have the ability to get a new one.
Yeah, if I could just clarify that CIP. That CIP was for a redesign of the slide system. And what I was proposing was we use that money and just, I was gonna bring one, a shackle that broke off the other day, which you find amazing. It looks like it's from a shipwreck from 200 years ago. So we were gonna replace chain shackles and those things and then do the fancy design at another time. That was our plan.
Mr. Gasper.
I think it would be responsible of us to take the advice of the Ports and Harbors Director, who knows this stuff better than us and says he doesn't need the new design, so that's why I made the motion.
Further discussion. Mr. Ford.
Just one question for clarification. You spoke, when you were speaking of these units, you said that there are 5 or 6 that we use regularly, but there's 30 in place. Did I understand
No,
correctly?
no, there's 30 along the port, and the ones that have traditionally or historically had a problem are the same 5 or 6 locations out of the 30.
Got it. Thank you. I just needed that resolved in my mind.
So just to clarify what you said, I'm not sure. It was to design a new system because they were hanging up.
Right.
And so do we not need that new design anymore?
Well, that's what I'm saying is the design was to reconfigure 30 Yokohamas across the port. And so what I'm saying is,
Oh.
right, so for now, I think we're just as well served by replacing the hardware that's on those 5 or 6, we'll play, say, 6 locations that traditionally hang up or have a problem. And then revisit this other design, which I'm sure, it's a good design. It's not necessary at the moment, if we address the 5 or 6, but I mean, it does improve the port, but it can be deferred.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
And so that's a lot less.
Right, because the hardware, right, and we'll do the work in-house, so I've sat with the maintenance staff and they're confident they can do it themselves.
So we're not actually replacing any of the Yokohamas?
No,
Oh, okay, I misunderstood, sorry.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I'm good.
I thought you
No.
were.
So to fix these, it's gonna cost you the 27,000.
it will probably in chain, hardware. I just keep it general,
Thank you.
hardware costs.
Further discussion on the motion for, was it the whole thing or?
No.
25?
50 to 25, cut
Okay.
in half. So it's reducing.
Reducing, got it. Clerk will call the roll.
Kistler,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Finnegan,
No.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani.
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
No.
Motion passes. Mr. Gass.
I move to remove account 620.01 salvage and disposal of impounded property.
Second.
Now, if we get stuck with a cruise ship, it's gonna cost. Just so we're-
I think
$1,500 to remove, right?
It's gonna cost. Hey, in 2020, some ships are just left places. It's not gonna happen.
We couldn't get so lucky.
Clerk will call the roll.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes, sorry.
Kistler,
Yes, thinking of you.
Flora,
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Gas.
Yes.
Amendment passes. Other amendments. Ms. Bradbury.
502.01 temporary wages is the 6, and I think this might be for city manager, it involves something on Thursday. Is the 6:30 amended estimate what you guys have asked us to approve on Thursday? Because there's a budget transfer thing, okay. So that 6:30 is assuming that we approve that, right? Is that what I'm?
In the estimate, Councilmember Bradbury, yes. So last year when we prepared the budget, it was still kind of partial year. We weren't sure. So it was not sufficient because you can see we're amending the temporary estimate and amending the budget. And then, of course, then the 2023 is based on what we did this year for next year.
I was just curious on if this, I just wanted to make sure that the 630, or 630,000 included the amendment that we're going for on Thursday. So that is in there.
Yes. Yeah, the one on Thursday isn't in addition to this. This is included in that number on Thursday.
Okay, follow up on that then. Do we have a hiring plan, a game plan, any of that for seasonal staff? Because if I remember correctly, when it brought forth before we were talking, well, it was because we were offering higher wages than what we needed to, it was that higher amount. So I just want to make sure that money is being used wisely. That's really it. Anything? Play? Anyone?
Yeah, I was gonna, really, it's,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's, because it's you guys that really hire the seasonal staff for.
Right, so we do have to plan, yes, we do actually, we're ready to, we're just waiting for it to be approved. We're hoping to advertise over the holidays while people are home for Christmas. So we have all the ads ready to go, and we're certainly, we're not looking to unring that bell on the wages, it'll be the same rate that we offered last year. And what that does, just so you know, that, I mean, there's a lot of benefits that, aside, I mean, it costs more, but the benefits are, we get older staff who can come earlier in the season and stay later. It reduces our training. The breakdown is it costs about $600 a person to train people on the port between quick flagger training and then miscellaneous training. And so the more people we can bring back, though that's a small percentage of the whole picture, they're more experienced from a safety and security perspective. We can slide them right in. They're mentors for other folks. So there's a whole host of benefits, and I don't think we'll get that if we reduce any wages.
Ms. Britwood.
Does anybody know how much we spent in 2020 in this? I'm just trying to get a non-COVID,
Yeah.
non-COVID year.
19.
Is what I'm trying to go for.
2019.
Yeah, 2019, sorry. I'm just trying to compare it to a non-COVID year.
Right.
Like, what was it originally?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was a different, remember, it was also a different wage at that time, so.
Yeah, I just was wondering, the base,
Yeah.
what that was.
There was also no competition with any other port facilities.
And we also had more people. I mean, there's a lot of factors. I just wanted to see what that figure was so that you can translate it in. I don't agree with the wage given out right now, like at the port, for some of the people that are hired. So that's the only reason I'm asking for it.
But that also adds more flaggers down at Berth, 4, right?
Those aren't ours.
Those aren't ours?
Those private security,
The private security, 49 security.
I do not.
Will you be able to get that number for her by Thursday?
Yeah, we can get it in like.
We'll look for it as you.
It's a race of thumbs.
Find it faster. You guys can get a Twix.
It's about
Twix card?
474,000 in 2019.
Oh, good job.
124.
474,000 in 2019.
Yes.
Daryl, legal services and accounting services, 640.01, 75,000.
Yeah, did I put that in?
I'm sorry.
Legal and accounting services?
640.01.
I don't think that's from me.
You get no extra.
Oh, it's a placeholder. Last year,
It's just in case.
same placeholder as last year.
I checked it. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Matani, we do keep that in case we need to engage with an expert in port negotiations. So if we do things with CLIA, if we come up with other plans, we do need to hire outside counsel to make sure our interests are protected.
No, follow up. So our attorney firm cannot do any of those legal
They
services?
can do legal work, but I would be more comfortable having an expert.
Thank you.
Like an admiralty attorney.
Right, there you go.
Sorry. Is it okay if I pull my phone out to use a calculator? I cannot find a calculator on my. Sorry, I just wanted. It's my phone. I just.
I don't care if you pull your phone up.
So this is just a placeholder, the 75,000?
Correct, and if we're gonna do something legislatively or make any statutory recommendations, that's when we reach out to those types of experts.
Thank you.
I don't have to do the whole thing over, do it. It's not.
Yeah.
Yep, all the way back to Harvard.
That's
That's what happens.
The lights are on.
But it was working, but it doesn't sound like it is.
Oh, no.
Love hate.
Try it again, Daryl, since they're waiting.
That's, yeah, no.
How about that? Try that. On under the dais, so.
Did it come unplugged?
Am I good?
Actually, let's go ahead.
Check right down there and see if
Actually,
it.
hold on a second, the clerk. Anytime.
Live now.
Go ahead, Ms. Bradbury.
Gosh, now I lost my train of thought.
Later.
Would you like to start?
You want to use the calculator or something?
I gotta come back now, I forgot.
Other questions for the board snow director?
Oh, yeah, here we go. Sorry.
No problem.
Have we looked at, contracting out this, port security services so that we're not, like, what is the cost comparison of somebody else doing it versus us doing it? I just wonder, I mean, we're starting to creep up into a range. It's a pretty good chunk of money. I'm just wondering, I know, depending on the level of security, I'm gonna use the word officer, person, with the Coast Guard plan, it can alter like how many and what you need and things like that. So I just didn't know if it's time to start maybe analyzing both contracted service versus doing it in-house if we are going to pay these high wages. Everybody loves to leave me blank today.
We have not.
Right.
But it's definitely, I mean, we could look into it. I mean, I would just add that it's, you know, a very specialized service that I'm not sure, I don't want to say it doesn't exist or it couldn't exist, but we hire, what, 50
Right.
seasonal people that we need 7 days a week for 12 hours a day. They need to have TWIC cards. They need to be part of our port security plan. I'm not sure if the port security plan would allow for a contractor versus paid staff of the city. That's something that we'd have to look into.
Yeah, I don't think it distinguishes.
It
between the
probably
two,
doesn't.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, my bigger concern, I think it's a valid question, you know, it's something to look at, but my concern, it might take 50 jobs from local residents where some of these contractors are just here for the summer, so. But minor in the big picture, I guess.
Just to follow with that, there is a local company that offers this service that hires local people. So it just might be a shift in that, if that is, you know, a concern. I just think it's worth looking into. Not for next year, but
I agree.
future.
It's worth looking into.
Yeah.
It's worth looking
I seem to remember this coming up about 10 years ago, and at that time, there wasn't a local.
Correct. There
And
was
at that time, the whole thing was, well, they're gonna bring in 75 people from Florida, and that was not an acceptable option. But yeah, there is a local company.
On another side note, I know we're going to talk about port stuff like after the new year, but is this something, because of the cost of it, I know we take it out of the enterprise fund, but I'm starting to wonder, you know, what services should be passed on to the ship in terms of, if you want to come to the port, there's a fee for, just like dockage, there's a fee for security, there's a fee, because really, I mean, they require, sometimes they're the ones saying you have to stand here and here, and we want this many people. And so I'm just wondering, you know, as we go into looking at the port and the structure of ports and how those fees are all associated, I think that's something we should look at, because this money, the money they're paying us to dock, we're turning around and paying somebody to watch their ship while it's docked versus using that to improve our infrastructure to make sure that ship could tie up. So I just think as we go through that process, we should really look at all these services, including this, since it's over $500,000 now, as truly who should be paying that service.
I think certainly as our relationship with CLIA evolves, I think that's something we should be looking at, because I was talking to my friends from Juneau the other day, and it's amazing what they squeeze out of the industry that we.
Don't get me started.
We
Don't get me
need to
started.
be squeezing a little more.
Let's start squeezing.
Yeah, I would like to use a different term than squeeze. We're working on building a relationship.
That was actually the word they used. Was
But
squeeze.
again, we're trying to build a relationship, so maybe squeeze isn't the right word.
Further amendments or questions for the Ports and Harbors Director? Hearing none?
Thank you.
Which moves us on to risk management. Always a fun topic. What you got for us here?
Insurance is increasing. Our brokerage fee increased last year. So that's one item that increased, as well as liability. I know we saw a lot of claims come through our office. Some of them were minor, but there were a lot last year. Part of it had to do with the ice in the roads and accidents or snow causing damage to parked vehicles. So just general liability has increased, the marine has increased, and some of that we don't have a lot of control over because they group us in a group, and what happens down in another country affects us because we're all grouped in this marine insurance bucket. The other thing that increased significantly was cybersecurity. Last year it was 15,000 and went up to 45,000, and the insurance company talked about, you're lucky if you get a policy. So we could be totally uncovered if we're lucky we have a policy. So far so good with that, and we meet the qualifications enough to at least obtain a policy. So we don't have a lot of control over the market with the insurance. We're kind of at their mercy. And,
So moving on.
we did get a big refund on our workers' comp, but I think most of that had to do with the fact that we had frozen positions, and therefore our wages were lower, so we got a return. But
So I'm wondering if, what kind of mitigation on workers' comp? We have a high experience mod. And I'm wondering if you ever thought about looking at the kind of workers' comp claims that we're having and seeing if there's some training or whatever that would help bring that mod down. It's a 25% surcharge.
But there's certain training, and of course our safety coordinator deals with all of the safety training with each division. So that would be a better question for him, but any kind of training, we put out a listing of the types of training that are available. And if people can take advantage, of course, fire and police are involved with our insurance training. So they're utilizing it. And those are some of the bigger ones because obviously with their positions, their work, they would be most likely to have an injury. And then the other ones are, I know that electric, telecom, and water all have safety training. Utilize the Civic Center for that.
Yeah, but if you could focus in on where the problems are, maybe, and see if,
Mr. Mayor, Counselor Kistler, I'll be honest with you, we need a full insurance review on our claims management. And we just haven't done it. And I was looking for what you're asking for, and it's not something that we've done. Ideally, what will happen is we'll do an analysis of our claims. And it's something we can do in-house. We don't have to hire somebody to do it. We can take care of it. It's kind of low on my priority list, but it is something we need to do. And typically what happens is once you identify those, you can do your risk reduction and mitigation training. And so I have found, surprisingly over time, when you actually put in a full risk awareness program, you will see immediate reduction. So it's on the list. It's pretty darn low down there, but you're right. We need to do a full claims analysis.
so it's like, over $100,000 worth of surcharge on there, so.
Ms. Bradbury, then Mr. McDonald.
So follow up on Councilmember Kistler. So currently the policy, are those trainings that you speak of, safety trainings, are those mandatory for staff, or is it not? Is there extra training if somebody does something that's, lifting a box or whatever? I don't know if something's just throwing it out there, but is that mandated, like that our staff is getting done, or has it not been in the past? Is that what you're kind of getting at, or?
Correct. There is regulatory safety training that we have to do. So for electric and for other of the utilities, and I know electric for sure, but when you're on a system under federal rules, you do have to do mandatory training. Same with people with CDLs. There are certain things that you have to do in order to maintain that. As far as like a general trip hazards, things like that, we don't have. And so actually I've been talking to Lacey and Marie. We're looking at a full citywide training policy. We don't have one that says every single employee will attend sexual harassment training. Every single employee will go over trip hazards,
Like OSHA 10 or something like that.
Correct. And so we don't have a citywide program. We have the ones that meet our regulatory need and our safety needs within each of the departments. So fire obviously has mandatory training program with them. Electric has mandatory. We don't have a citywide OSHA training program. So that's what we need to work through. So our safety coordinator does keep up with the mandatory stuff and making sure that employees are meeting those requirements. But that's department by department. But without doing a claims analysis, I don't know where the accidents are happening.
So this,
The ice.
this might be a question, I think, Councilmember Kistler might know this answer better, but how long does it take to get that percentage lowered?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it like if you do really good over a year, then?
3 out of 5.
That's what I was kind of thinking.
I think it's a rolling average.
Yeah.
3 years.
Well, on the claims in order for us to purchase the insurance. I know I came from a self-insured environment where we had a pool of municipalities or a pool of counties. And so we saw returns within the first year because they didn't do a 3-year average. But that was a self-insured pool. But typically with insurers, it's a 3-year average on your liability.
Yeah, it's at least 3 years.
Yeah.
Sure.
I know for counties, we actually did a 10-year average. So once your 10-year average improved, that's when you get the rebates on your insurance. So it just depends on, I don't know yet. It depends on how we're purchasing it.
But if you have big claims in 1 year, it can fall off pretty fast if you really make a big effort on it.
Way to save money, so.
Nice.
Mr. McDonald.
625.05. I hate to ask this, but I have to. Any of this charges passed on to the end user? Wharfage and marine premiums.
So I guess the simple answer is yes. I mean, it's theoretically part of our rates, but as the managers mentioned numerous times, all of our rates for all of our utilities, all of our services need to be examined because they're not necessarily capturing the real expense of the operations of that department. So the simple answer is yes, but the reality is no.
I think we need to look into that though.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Further questions regarding risk management?
It's so exciting.
Hearing none, we'll move on to an area we have even less control over, debt service. We owe.
There's no change. We didn't have any refundings and it's the same debt service, but no, I take that back. We will possibly have our new ambulance lease, but we will have an ambulance lease. So the first payment will be in 2020.
Questions about debt service?
Can you say that one more time? Sorry.
Sorry.
No, yes.
We
that's-
budgeted in 2022, but our first payment won't happen until 2023 just because of the timing of when we receive the funds.
And that's for 38,000
Yes.
and change, okay. So didn't use it in 2022.
We got the money, but then the first payment is something until 2023. So.
Okay.
They paid for the ambulance repair refurbish. But we won't be, it's 1 year from, I think, the date of when they paid for the ambulance refurbishment. So they paid the vendor, but we pay 1 year after that.
So it's just a reappropriation, not.
No, it's our 7 years. We'll pay that whole ambulance refurbishment that was in last year's budget for the fire department.
Mr. Bertoni?
Just a question for information. Debt service interest, has anybody looked at renegotiating that interest rate?
We get information from our bond bank, as most of our debt is through our bond bank. We locked in a rate with Bank of America, so that won't change. Right now rates are increasing, so when we contact them regarding the fire department assets that they would like to purchase in 2023, I imagine that those will be more costly. But with our bonds, the bond bank will reach out to us when it's economical to refund. So right now, because rates are increasing, we most likely aren't going to be refunding.
Thank you.
If rates decrease, then it may work out for us. But we're always looking for that.
Further questions about debt service? Hearing none, transfers and advances. These are the meat of the budget.
I think the biggest change is the Civic Center and then the capital related to the Civic Center. Of course, you've already looked at the Civic Center's budget, but these are the transfers from the transient tax fund. That's the big change in the middle there on page 83. And then as we look at CPB and fire department funding, how much should come from CPB, we adjusted that. This doesn't reflect that, but the council has made a motion to change that. So we will be updating the fire operations support. And then the rest is related to capital. So if the capital was approved at 27.5, I think we just deferred, right? So that'll go away at a CPD. And then, of course, there's the SEMT fund, which was new in 2022. So those are new transfers. Other than that, basically the same transfers that we've been doing year after year. The increase at the top related to community grant fund. So of course, if you, as the council, decides to approve or not approve certain amount of grant funding, then that transfer will adjust accordingly.
Mr. Bertoni?
910.210. Just information, a transfer out of the marijuana sales tax fund, 200,000 to the general fund. How much is there? Can more be transferred?
No. This, right, so right now, the transient, I mean, that was not transient, that was marijuana. So 210 is transient, but 211 is marijuana sales tax. So In the main.
It says two, okay.
To 11.
Waking, Brown.
I think it's a typo.
The
Oh,
budget, where's the
On
budget?
on here, it says
It's a
2:11.
community humanitarian.
Oh, there's that one on the page.
Yeah.
So the 200,000 for the humanitarian funding is to fund police operations. So, there was an increase in the rate proposed to be able to continue funding the 200,000 for police operations as well as the, grant program for the, I think, path and the new, overnight warming shelter.
Yes.
Slightly.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Ms. Bradbury, Mr. Johnson. Sorry.
Not used to me being here.
No,
Uh,
Mr. Gas was all excited. I wanted-
So after all these transfers of the CPB Special Revenue Fund, what is the total balance in that fund with the changes that the council had made? Do we have that?
We'll be bringing that at the next meeting to identify all of the changes that have been made through the general government budget.
Okay.
Because it would be easier to bring it all at one time.
Okay.
So you can see that.
Can I also request that for the Port Enterprise Fund? I'm just wondering what
It'll
our
be all funds.
balance, oh, all
Yeah.
funds, awesome, thank
Yeah.
you.
The whole fund balance is
And I
all the
will
time.
stop asking.
Mr. Gas.
While we're on the marijuana topic, I was just wondering, at some point in this, are we gonna vote on the increase for the marijuana sales tax increase, or is that?
We'll be bringing that forward as an ordinance change.
Okay. At the end of that budget meetings?
In the new year.
Oh, in the new, okay. Thank you.
So just to follow up on that, so this includes as if we were going
The
to
budget
increase.
incorporates the increase.
Okay.
Excuse
Just a thought I had, part of the reason that the library needs extra people there is because of the homeless population that spends time up there. Did anyone think that maybe some of that money might go to help the library with their budget?
The library receives funding, sorry.
No, go ahead.
The library receives funding from the borough as well as, we First Day Libraries. So, adding another funding source, you can certainly look at it, but we don't have that much left in the marijuana sales tax fund without an increase in the rate. So, I think that's a council decision, but I think it muddies the waters if we start transferring from other funds into funding the library, just because of the other funding sources we have there.
Mr. Gas.
I would just say on that, I think, we're finding that we already don't have as much money as we want in here for our police and homeless at that fund, so I don't think there's any room left to squeeze. Sorry for using that. Squeeze.
It's not to do with relationships, so we're good.
Further discussion on transfers and advances. What? So that takes care of, general government budget.
I just got some questions. I'm trying to make sure I have all my notes. I didn't hear a lot of the meetings. I had to go back and reread them sometimes. And just to confirm, we frozen one position and that is library, or did that?
Nope.
That got shot down. So there is no frozen positions in general government whatsoever. And what was the specific motion that was brought forth from the library? Is it just that it was that particular
Just that one.
position?
It was from the meeting of the 30th.
Okay.
Just a question for the manager for clarification, transient fund. Will we have that in your report as well, what's left in that fund
It's
after all the transfers?
budget overview,
Uh-huh.
see one page. And that one's,
I don't think that one will be changing unless. Anybody wants to excuse.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Matani, I know Councilor Gage had brought a proposal forth to increase that, so we have not included that potential increase with the budget. So that, but it is something that you've asked us to explore.
Is that gonna be on the next agenda? Or
It will be
in
in
the new
January.
year? Yeah.
I don't know which one, but it will be in January.
And can I get clarification on how many employees work at the library? I'm confused. I get different numbers in the budget.
I thought it was 11.
Is it 11?
11.185 is what we
Yeah.
were doing.
So it's-
What was like 11
Yeah, I thought it was 11 something.
It's 11, but that's if they're, I think it's 13 if they're fully staffed.
11.1.
11.125. And can you refresh my mind on how many hours they're currently open right now? A week.
I can answer it. So they're closed Sunday and they're only open till 6 PM. And with a full staff, they can be open till 8 PM.
I believe it's 10 to 6.
Yeah,
10 to 6, so.
10 to 6 with the short staff and
So 43 hours.
6 times,
And then Saturday is
6 times 8.
Saturday's a half day.
it's 20.
So like they can't
Yeah.
like,
I'm just looking for the,
Yeah.
the number, the hour that they're open right now is what I'm
it's
looking
10 to
for.
6, Monday
Monday
to
through
Friday.
In a week, like the collective total, I guess, so 8, 5, 40 plus 4, 44? Is that what it was?
Saturday. I mean,
I think so.
Sorry, I'm trying to get caught up and make sure that I'm getting all the correct information.
No, you're fine.
There's a lot of back and forth in the meetings that I wasn't able to hear everything.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bradbury, it is open Monday through Saturday, 10 to 6. So 8 hours
48.
times 6, 48 hours.
Straight that now. Yes.
So they haven't been open on Sundays.
That is correct.
And what's the minimum they have to be at for state
45
funding?
to get the grant.
It was 50.
It was
50,
50.
thought it was
that's right.
They weren't open long enough.
Yeah, to get that
But they
$7,000.
had a waiver for a couple of years.
Yeah.
on whether it's-
But they might lose the waiver because the COVID thing was okay. That's why they got the waiver.
That's what I remember. though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further questions about the city budget? Now, do we actually have to approve the budget now or do we approve?
No,
Okay,
we will defer at the end of the meeting, we'll just do a motion and start.
Okay, because we're gonna start KPU, so. Let's just take about a 5-minute break. We're back. Time now to move into new business, resolution number 22-868, adopting the budget for the year 2023 appropriated from Ketchikan Public Utilities Enterprise Fund for the fiscal year 2023. Chair will entertain a motion.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move the city council approve resolution number 22-2868, adopting the budget for the year 2023, appropriating from the Ketchikan Public Utilities Enterprise Fund for the fiscal year 2023 and establishing an effective date.
Second.
Moving to second, discussion. Hearing none, clerk will call the roll. Oh, actually, I'm sorry.
Don't we need to discuss the budget?
Yes.
We're not going, yeah.
What are you doing?
Oh, wishful thinking. 5% to get better.
Let me all go home.
Mayor, you need to
Except
go
we
home.
can't- we can't discuss it.
No, you can't.
Yeah, Point of order, Mayor, jeez. Point of order.
No, I like the idea.
Want to vote on it?
We hold that in advance and then skip on to 6:16.
Testing, sorry.
Okay, we have a couple of budget updates we need to make before we start. So budget update number 1, 2022 capital project estimate reflecting council action and decrease the 2023 capital improvement program for telecommunications division. Chair Warren.
Your Honor, I move the city council amend the 2023 Ketchikan Public Utilities Operating and Capital Budget, increasing the 2022 estimate for infrastructure account number 730.00, $223,511, and decreasing the telecommunication division's 2023 capital improvement program CIP number 19, network security capital project infrastructure account number 730.00, $200,000 from $300,000 to $100,000.
Second.
Moving second, discussion.
Can we get what it is? Like just a little quick brief.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, councilors, if you'll recall, we made this purchase, we did a budget adjustment, I believe, the meeting in November in order to spend the $200,000 in FY '22, and then we would decrease FY '23. So because of the licensing and the purchase costs and the license expiration, at the end of this year, we made the purchase in FY '22. So since it's done, we don't need it in FY '23 budget.
Perfect. Further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, clerk will call the roll.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
Kissler.
Yes.
Amendment passes. And KPU budget update number 2, addition of a 2023 water capital project, Peterson Street Water Main Rebuild. Chair Warrington, a motion.
Your Honor, I move the city council amend the 2023 Ketchikan Public Utilities Operating and Capital Budget by increasing the Water Division's capital improvement program to add the Peterson Street Sewer Main Rebuild Project and increasing the infrastructure account number 730.00, $362,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do you want to give a quick, I know we talked about this about an hour ago, but
Mr. Mayor, councilors, as you recall, we talked about this about an hour ago. This is to, as we do the Peterson Street rehab, we'd like to take out that sewer main and make the replacement and repair. As well as the water line.
moved and seconded. Discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Bradbury,
Oh, sorry.
So I just want to know what's the difference between the first one and this one?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, Councilor Bradbury, this is only a portion of the project. So in this one, we're making the $362,000 out of the water divisions in KPU's budget. Whereas the other one is in general government and
Wastewater.
as well as streets.
Into the same one.
It's
Correct.
the same project, but you know,
Okay.
it's a KPU.
Just different funds.
Will that cover?
Yes,
the
that covers
project?
all the work.
Complete,
Yeah.
okay.
Whenever we dig a hole, it always seems to involve both the city and KPU.
Okay.
Clerk will call the roll.
okay. Bradbury,
Yes.
Kissler,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gas,
Yes.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Flora.
Yeah. Amendment passes. Okay. Now, on to the KPU budget. Does staff have a brief presentation?
Well, the KPU budget we're presenting to you, of course, is based on need and not necessarily want. These are things that we need to take care of and maintenance that we've deferred throughout the year. I will point out, we're not recovering through rates everything we should. And I think I've mentioned that to you as a council even before you hired me, that we do need to do a full rate review study and make sure our rates are lining up with our our needs. The purpose of that is not to increase rates, but to manage our increases. So they're not something where we're going to come out, oh, we need a 10, 12, 13% increase in 1 year. So we can project over 20, 30 years what our needs are going to be, project how we can be more efficient, and then project how that would impact our ratepayers. As you know, KPU is an all enterprise funds. Therefore, there is no general fund support. These are supposed to be self-supporting funds. They also contribute to general government. And what I mean by that is we do have allocations from KPU to pay for city administration. So obviously under administration in KPU, half my office salaries come from the utilities and half come from general government. That's a very clear example. But we also have allocations for human resources, for legal, and items like that. So you'll see that throughout the budget. I don't have much to say other than we need to look at our rates and we need to ensure that we're not deferring maintenance beyond. We don't want to put ourselves in a situation where we're reactive and putting out fires at all times. And that's kind of where we are today. We're just responding to basic needs. There's really nothing in here that is not absolutely necessary. We're fortunate in that KPU is not impacted by the cruise industry in the sense that we went through what we went through. However, we are still having challenges on the personnel side. And these are typically highly licensed and specialized jobs, particularly electric, water, because you can't just hire somebody and train them up. Even a journeyman, for example, takes at least 4 years of training on the lines. For water and wastewater, if you were to get to a level 3 water operator, that's at least 8 years in the job, much less taking the tests that are required. So we're still having staffing challenges, and that's going to come up pretty much everywhere in Ketchikan when it comes to labor shortages. And that's nationwide. So even, I came from a large utility. I had 320 employees, and when I left, there were still 65 vacancies because they're highly specialized utility jobs. And so it's not just Ketchikan. It's a nationwide problem. I know you have more of a summary than my off the cuff.
Two quick questions before we get off the music. So what's a rate study going to cost? And is it something that can be reasonably accomplished for the next calendar year?
A rate study, if you do a full rate study, it's about $45,000. I don't think we should do it in FY23. I think we need to have rate policy because you want to make sure that your policies are in place to prevent things like rate shock, to hold us accountable as stewards of those ratepayer funds. So once you have, and that's what we're going to have a consultant come in and a rate expert who's worked in this area to give a training so you can fully and knowledgeably set those rate policies. And once the rate policy is in effect, then you can do your rate study because otherwise we're just meeting need. We're not looking at pre-planning. We're not looking at 20-year planning. We're not looking at debt. Debt cycling is the best way to manage taxes and taxation so you don't have those increase in shocks. If I need a new water plant and it's suddenly $15 million, if I'm planning for that and I'm doing it through debt cycling, then that's something where I don't have to have rate shock. I don't have to implement high changes in rates. It can be very subtle and very beneficial to our community as a whole. So I don't think we can do a study, but FY23, my plan is to at least get the rate policy down and then follow up with a study in FY24.
Mr. Gaspar?
If I could follow up on that, maybe I'm missing something, but isn't the point of the rate study to come up with the rate policy?
No.
No,
and the reason I say that because your rate policy, if, for example, you have to tell us what you want included in rates. So if you want what levels of CIP, what levels of debt, what you consider reasonable to be included and built into rates. And so that's the start, is what should be supported by rates. So really, you can't just say everything. You want to say if it's employee growth, if it's inflation, those are the policies you want to set forward.
So
how often you review them.
So in that case, then could you describe what the rate study specifically is? Because I guess I'm misunderstanding.
Right. A rate study will take the things that are allowed, and the reason I say it that way, for example, known and measurable costs are typically built into your rate cycle. So in other words, a known and measurable cost is I know I have to repair so many miles of line every year. I know I've got a new union contract that's going to increase employee wages by 2%. I know that my health insurance costs are increasing or decreasing by X. Those are known and measurable costs. Then you have an option of rate riders. So if you want a pass-through cost, let's say the SEPA contract, instead of building that into rates, you'd rather have that as a pass-through rate, then it shows up on the bill differently, just like your diesel surcharge. It's not built into your rates, it's charged only when we use diesel. So if you want to do that for your SEPA purchase power, you could build that into a rate rider or a surcharge rather than within the rate itself. So if SEPA goes up and down, it's a direct pass-through to the customer and it doesn't impact your operations collection. Or you can build it into rates. That's the council's objective. Another is on your CIP. Do you want to build in 20-year debt cycling or 10-year debt cycling? Do you want 5-year debt cycling? Because if you want to do things in 5 years and do major capital outlay, obviously your rates are going to be much higher. If you want to do a 20-year or 30-year debt cycle, that's a much lower rate. It just means we have to be better planners. And when we build our infrastructure, it has to last us 30 years, if that's the council's directive. Another is you could have regulatory rate riders. And if, I can't think of one right now in Ketchikan. I know in New Mexico, we had to build in regulatory riders and lawsuit and legal riders because we were in a lawsuit with Colorado, Texas, and the United States. So if we're spending $600,000 on attorneys for water rights, legal fights on Supreme Court hearings, we don't want that to come out of our operational fund. That needed to be a separate rider that's a pass through to the customers. So those are the things that the policy says. And then the rate study takes those baselines, looks at all your costs and say, this is where everything applies. So also in your policy, your rate study will identify who's the big draw. Do I have to build more pipeline for an industrial user or do I have to build it for residential users? That's what the study will break down. Which users are using what part of your infrastructure and what portion of the cost should be allocated to that rate group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and continue. You're handing off to
Oh, Lisa.
Ms. Simpson.
Okay,
Leave it
so
in there.
just a few other things to add to what the general manager said. So in terms of the KPU budget, it has a lot of the same concerns that general government has, even though, like the manager said, it's not responding to decreased cruise passenger visitation or sales tax revenue. It's still fighting some of the same battles like inflation, rising cost of personnel, increased goods and services costs, things like that are really reflected here. As the council will recall, you did approve a collective bargaining agreement. So that is definitely influencing wages over the next year for both represented and non-represented employees of KPU. So you'll see big jumps there. We have proposed a total of 3 new positions through KPU. Again, these are very needed based on different programs and projects that different departments have planned. We have a much more robust capital improvement plan. Again, through the pandemic, a lot of those projects were deferred or they were not able to be accomplished because of low staffing. So you'll see a much heavier capital improvement program going into this year, but not any heavier than we've had pre-pandemic. So it's really just getting us back to that pre-pandemic level. We do have 2 rate increases program. We have 4% for water. This is to account for the additional debt service with the completion of the Schoenbart raw water main project. And we have a 1.5% electric rate increase programmed in the budget as well. This is responding to the rate that SEPA will implement for its wholesale power rate. So this is just us keeping up with our costs. This is not adding to our revenue for additional operations and capital. Going into 2023, things looked pretty good in terms of where reserves were sitting. Again, this was because of deferred capital projects and having a lot of positions vacant. But if you look at where things are projected to end based on the spending plan, what this budget is proposing is a 3.2 million draw from reserves. So we are expending far more than we are anticipating in KPU. If we were to get rid of all of our capital projects, there would still be a $1.6 million deficit for the KPU enterprise fund. Our revenues are pretty flat, but again, our expenses keep going up. This year, each of the three main divisions of KPU, their revenue is not keeping up with their expenses. For example, electric has needs to pull $8.4 million from reserves for its funding plan. Telecom needs 4.4, and water needs $4.4 million for its vendor plan. Again, this is not hinting, it is very clearly showing that especially electric and water need to have rates that help them stand on their own. As the council is well aware, the telecommunications division has historically been the revenue maker and has supported those two other divisions. Telecom has its own capital needs now and is no longer in a position to do that. So this is why you're seeing each of those three main divisions basically having a deficit for this spending plan. We have a number of vacancies, like I've mentioned, so you'll see some increases to our travel and training budgets, again, to help train the next generation of people as we have folks retire, we take on apprentices. We need to get our staffing back up to normal levels in order to complete a lot of these projects. We were just barely able to comply with the fund balance policy that the council has set forth, but we do not, I believe, comply with our bond covenants. We do apply with bond covenants, yep.
Just not
Just
the
barely,
debt service.
just not the debt service. So again, we're just sort of skating by with this budget in terms of policy. And certainly taking a big hit to our reserves. So just in closing, as the council just discussed with the manager, it is imperative for KPU's future if we're going to look at how we're going to afford replacing capital, how we're going to afford people that have very, very specialized skill sets. Our rates have to be examined. They have to be, because we're treading water right now at best. And on that happy note, that is all I have to say.
Which one?
So if next year's plan is to set the rate policy, and the year after that, 2024 would be the rate review, should we expect this same presentation for the 2024 budget, that we're gonna just draw down further into reserves because we will not have implemented the rate studies results by then?
Essentially, yes, because we'll be using historical data. However, my hope is that we can at least get base policies in place. And so what I mean by that is I need to know from you all what we're willing to include and build into our rates. And that includes the capital planning. So there's going to be tolerance, what our customers can handle. The one thing we don't want to do is just come with a blanket. We need to do 10% or 5% or whatnot. You know today that we're going to have to generate another $1 million worth of revenue in FY24 one way or another, whether it be through an actual rate study or just flat rate setting, which we've been doing historically. That's how we set rates historically. There are a lot of changes I'd like to make and propose with the council, but that's going to come in more of a summer work session environment as we start to implement that. So my hope is that we can get something better in place before FY24. But the bottom line is we will have to increase rates at some point to make the.
No, I understand that. I'm just gonna look at $3.2 million drawdown on reserves with CIP 1.6 without. Obviously, that's a huge impact in 1 year. And I'm just concerned going forward, how often can we replicate that before we're
Correct.
in big trouble? Right. Thank you.
So with the SEPA increasing to 7.3, it says in here that 1.5% increase to fund the wholesale. What does that bring the price up to for residents?
So it's a 0.25% or 2.25 cent increase for us. So what is our rate currently?
1.1.
So I will bring that back.
So
we can bring a comparison.
well, what are we paying now per? Can we ask?
Mr. Bynum, could you?
What do we pay now?
You are.
Different.
Yeah, residential.
Yeah, resident, how much are we paying currently? And with the 1.5% increase, what would be?
Sure. Our residential rates are 11 cents. And so with the SEPA increase, this was 2.25 cents rate increase. So they were 7.05, and now they will be 7.3. So basically that 0.25 cents will be incurred on our current rate. So we'll have to figure out how to do this.
So you're saying we're not gonna increase the 11?
I'm
we are
saying
gonna
that at this point, that there will have to be something considered as we move forward in the future to cover those costs.
There's
Yes.
like a 1.5% that's been incorporated into the budget.
So I have to say, I apologize for my tardiness. You guys have high security here at the building, and I don't have the back door key. The back door is locked.
It happens to us all the time.
And everybody that I try to call or message apparently.
Did you try the handicap button? That's what worked last time. I couldn't get in.
Doesn't
So I
work.
apologize.
There's Jeremy's message.
And and the disability button is not working.
Oh, it's not working either.
I think there was a
Oh, I
cleaning
got
person that exited the building.
Donna, can I follow up with, okay, so with it says in here 1.5% increase, that would put us at $11 or 11.17, which still would not cover the 0.25. So we're looking at a higher percentage increase.
Well, I think that the first year was a partial year, so we weren't looking at that increase over the full year. But
Okay, I got what you're saying now. Okay.
So if I may also on that particular observation, we only purchase about half of our power from C, 50%. So even if they raise their rate 0.25 cents, we're not bearing that full cost against the full rate.
So I'm sorry, did did you finish your part of the presentation? Okay. So that takes us out, so that's the transmittal letter, we're good?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So would that mean if we were to figure that into the rate increase, what would that bring it to, like 12 cents or?
with a 10 cent per kilowatt hour, you're looking at, I think, 11 cents.
We're at 11 cents.
11.16 is
So
what it would be with the,
So-
according to this increase
Are we
rate.
at 11?
Yeah,
We are.
Okay, then yes, so it's
Residential rate.
11.
Yeah, I was just referring to residents, commercials, you can pass it on.
So-
Residents really can't, so.
so if we were to raise, I'm curious if we were to raise the rates from 11 to like, say, 12, would that at least shore us up while we're doing all this rate study, or is that, it wouldn't even help?
And Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gage, obviously any increase.
I know, but
We're
we're just,
trying to be as conservative as possible to just cover our SEPA increase, but we are short. We will have to raise rates either now or later.
It helps to look at page C4. C4 allows you to see the total column is the total operations and all costs. So electrics, operating costs, debt service, payments, and late taxes, and major capital outlay. So then telecommunications and water. And then how we're paying for that. So the first column to the right of the total cost is revenues. And then we have some bond funding in the water division and some other minor funding. Then the rest of that is coming from reserves. So the 1.5% really only addresses the SEPA rate increase. It doesn't address the cost increase in wages, the increase in inflation, fuel, fuel will be covered by diesel surcharge if we had to charge that. And hopefully we don't have to.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilor, so we'll just pick on electric since that's what Michelle's referring to right now. Just looking at the 28 million to the 20 million revenues, you already know you're 40% behind. And the only way to do that is to eat into operations in order to control that. And that's even with us having a very bare bones budget in the sense that we're only addressing need. There's not any want here whatsoever. It really is just need.
When was the besides the SEPA increase that we did, last year? Right, yeah. When was the last like increase on the electric rate on the city side of it, not being caused by SEPA? I'm asking more questions.
I think it was 318.
18.
2018 was the last time.
I believe it was 3 or 3.5%.
Yeah.
And when was the last one before that? Sorry, I'm not.
My guys,
I'm trying to get a sense of.
go.
I know we have a schedule for that, but.
Wasn't it 2015?
And that's my memory is, it seems like over the past decade, it's been about every 3 years or so we have increased those rates. But I'm not trusting my memory, so.
I remember it was my first year and it was a hard decision, but we had to do it.
As hard as the water fights.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions regarding the overview before we dive into administration?
Can I request I get that information?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, for administration, this budget is simply comprised of myself, the assistant general manager, and our executive assistant. We're in 50% of the salary and services come out of the EU budget. And honestly, it's mostly just the salary and personnel. The increase you'll see in regular salary and wages is obviously we have a manager now, which we didn't in the last fiscal year. And then regular pay increases that we're experiencing throughout the entire utility. So that's the 2.5% cost of living adjustment. We've removed the management consulting services because we no longer have our SGR consulting to find a manager. And I think that's really it. We've got to replace the computer at the executive assistant's desk, and half of it will be coming from this budget.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Can you explain 600.01 travel business, $8,000?
This is our regular travel budget that we've had. It's actually expect to travel a little bit more. I wasn't able to attend AML this year just because I was focusing on the budget, but I would like to attend next year. I do anticipate being part of our legislative fly-ins as well as other meetings happening relevant to the city.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead.
640.04, did I understand that has been removed?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Reduced. And it's been reduced because remember, we still have a consultant coming in for the council directions. So we can get our mission statement done and our goals set, and then the rate setting.
Other questions regarding administration?
The 735.00 software, 20,000. You had that last year, and then you have that again this year.
That's related to hours in implementation of software, certain portions of our software program. We're still wanting to implement a PAF, an electronic PAF, and we just, we've been minus staff and haven't had the personnel to implement that. So those are just contingency hours, just in case we need extra help in implementing that and making changes to the software.
So my understanding is this is just a placeholder?
It's a placeholder so that when we start working on that project, we need to have hours from the software company to help assist us with that implementation.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, this is for our enterprise software, so it's the full financial suite that we run.
It is shared between general government.
Guess what we before we get that.
Further questions about admin? Okay, sales, marketing, and customer service.
Is this working?
Sort of, I can't tell.
Yeah, speak up.
I'll just yell.
Yeah, you know,
Kim Simpson, Division Head, Sales, Marketing, Customer Service, and Video Production. I've got 19 full-time employees, 2 in video and 17 in customer service, marketing, and business sales. And right now I have 2 open positions, although we've had PDFs out there waiting for signature for the past week. So we've interviewed and have made selections for those. And I do have 1 person who is still on the payroll, but is a absence due to a long-term medical. My division is funded through KT revenues, primarily telecom, and we're important because we are the division, part of the division that brings in the money and we sell the services. And one of the biggest changes to my budget this year is the request for an additional IPTV technician. Just like everybody else, we've struggled to find help. Generally, I've had temporary tech people that are available to film. And prior to the pandemic, I had 1 person who was down for 6 months of the year, came down from Anchorage. I had a person who was employed at the hospital, was helped us set up a lot of our sports filming and was available during the year. We've lost both those people permanently. Neither one have been available, and we've struggled. It's incredibly hard to find people who are available because these are people who they've got full-time jobs elsewhere. So trying to schedule them during times that we need them, it makes it incredibly hard, particularly if something during the day. We used to have techs at the high school. That program was eliminated. And so we no longer have the student techs. So filming any of the sports or any of the school activities, it no longer uses students. And we've attempted to hire some students, but there's not really the availability, and they don't do it. So the position is not standing there and just taking pictures and film. A lot of it is networking. It's sound and video engineering. It's not easy to train somebody on this. It's impossible almost to find. I couldn't, if I lost my technician now, I couldn't replace them. He has the knowledge. We used to have Andrew Bolton, who was my business sales engineer. He moved to Colorado. He was a good technical backup that could help in training. I don't have anybody else. And there's a deep understanding need of the software because all the pieces and parts that go together, it's an incredibly difficult job. Again, it's not just filming. So that is one of the big asks. We usually need 2 camera people on a job. And it was sad this weekend. I have no temps. We have some that we've hired. They're all out of town and will be out of town for a month. So we had a request to film the ballet performance. We're unable to do that because I had my production manager as well as my video tech at the high school. They were filming the wrestling. And that's the only thing that they can do. So we frequently need 2 cameras on a shoot, but often we have requests to film 2 things at the same time. We're just unable to do that. So that's my one big ask. In terms of increases, one of them, you'll see $4,600 in travel business. That is adding back in the ATA show for me and our time, which is, it's a big expo, and as well as a board meeting that I have at that time. That takes place in February. There is an increase in travel training education, $603. And that $2,200 increase is actually Cisco training. I've got my business tech, I don't want to call them business techs or business sales. They need additional training on Cisco products. And so that is to fund them, and that's a remote training. They'll be doing that online, so they don't have to go any place for that. 60503 is an increase. The $6,000 difference is my, every couple years I have to print, or there's the video book that, or excuse me, the TV guide that people get on how the remote control and everything works. That's a reprint of that, again, which we only have to do every few years. Thank you for Paymentus for agreeing to, I have decreased the bank and merchant charges 63003 by 20,000. Based on that, I think the savings will be a little bit more, but it's going to take a while to implement, so I didn't put the entire savings in there. And then technical services 635.12, that had an increase of 21,260. We actually don't need all of that now. We can reduce that by 15,000 to 39,260. That was changes to our website, and we were able to fund that this year. Management consulting services, slight increase there. That was just due to basically increases from OSG and some of our other vendors that are increasing things slightly. Rents and leases increase. That is due to the contracted increase for the mall rental. And then going down to furniture and fixtures, 790.15. I was going to do a remodel and customer service, creating another office in an area. I am not going to do that. I'm going to leave it the way it is. So we need to decrease that to $1,500. So that's reducing that by $8,500. Again, that's 790.15.
Reducing it to what?
To 1,500. I just take down to 1,500, so reducing it by 8,500. Machinery and equipment. That is changing out our camera equipment, and it's a big number, but it's not as big as it would be. What we're arranged to do is trade in some of our existing cameras. We have an issue where we bought cameras and they film in different colors. So if I have one camera filming and another one, there's actually a difference, and we have to go through and we have to color edit the entire item before we can combine them. And it is time consuming and it's ridiculous. So we're going to try and get all Sony cameras. And we've been talking with some of the camera people again to trade in some of what we have. So it's an increase of 6,550, but it's not the increase that it would be if we were just trying to buy new. And then computers, printers, and copiers, there is an increase of 11,400. That's just a standard replacement. We did not replace most of the computers we needed to in the pandemic, and we've got a laptop that crashed, so we're gonna have to replace that, and that was based on IT's recommendation. Any questions on that section? No? Okay. Moving into CIP, I've never had a capital project request before. I will do this year, and this is for a vehicle. So customer service and the video crew, we've never had our own vehicle. We always get the old vehicles that other divisions don't use anymore. So we initially, a police car, which we managed to run into the ground. And then from Telecom, we inherited their 1997 Chevy flatbed. It's a 25-year-old vehicle. It's rear-wheel drive, so we don't use it ever in the winter. It's primarily used for filming on the back. The driver's side door does not open, so you get in from the passenger side. The glove compartment has fallen off. It is heavily rusted, and it only starts, so we have spray starter fluids. You just open it up. I don't know how this works. I'm not sure how it even works. I couldn't do it. We spray starter fluid into something, and that's how we start it. And then we guys multiple times a year. And we don't have snow tires for it. So it's not the safest vehicle that we've ever had. We also have a 25-year-old Chevy Astrovan that we got from Telecom. It is four-wheel drive, which they like because they feel safe in it. It only has 2 seats, so it can't hold everybody we need. We did have the brakes go out on it, and that's what really caused panic because Jason Baldwin, my IPTV tech, was in it, and he was coming down Rivella Hill.
Oh.
But he still survived. The brakes are repaired, but they're incredibly tight. It's a cold starting problem. It doesn't start when it's cold. And it's a bad problem because it's the safest vehicle in the snow, but it doesn't start when it's cold. So that is not a good vehicle for us. It also does not lock. I've got a 10-year-old Ford Transit van. This one would be okay. It's 2-wheel drive. It only holds 2. It's good for the customer service group. We end up running the mail, picking things up when we have printing things done. Customer service will use that. And the last one is, we do have a 16-year-old Chevy Equinox. It is the only vehicle that will hold more than 2 people. And the back end fell off a year and a half ago. The tailgate won't open when it's over 70 degrees, so we don't know why. So you can't get into the back. It's warm. It's not that warm here a lot, so we can often get into the back of it. And then it has a leak in the ceiling. When you go down the hill, the water runs in your head. So we're asking for a vehicle. And they did a lot of research. What they're looking at is a Ford F-150. It would have a canopy on the back that they could carry everything. What's nice about it is they take the canopy off. They can use it in place of the flatbed to film where they need to at the games, particularly like the baseball and softball games. And because it has built-in plugs, we don't have to bring a generator. So when we're filming outside, we oftentimes have to bring a generator and set that up. This way we can literally plug in and do everything we need. We don't have to carry a generator along for it. It's an extended cab, so it would be able to hold everybody and everything. And their quote included winter tires, studded tires, and the canopy. And hauled around quite a number of different locations in Seattle, and they even included transportation from Seattle. And so the amount there is $67,000. So that is our ask for the capital project. And then we can get rid of 3 of the vehicles.
Ms. Bradley.
So this vehicle, this truck,
Yes.
is it brand new?
Yes.
Didn't we talk about surplusing some, I think we've talked about 5 or 6 budget that we're replacing that aren't necessarily that shape. I'm wondering if I'm sorry, but kind of move those over to this area, to replace the vehicle or something of that nature.
Mr. Gass.
Yeah, following up on that, obviously it sounds like they could use some newer vehicles for sure. But that is something I've noticed every year. We usually have quite a few surplus vehicles and, I mean, after the orientation on this budget that we received from the manager and assistant manager, it's obviously pretty dire straits. We always talk about we don't want to cut staff. We have all these projects. I just think this might be one small area where we could get 2 birds with 1 stone and look at repurposing one of these newer vehicles for this rather than spending that much money.
Since these vehicles have always been ones that have been given to us, as we're hoping at something that's in a drivable condition, has 4-wheel drive, an extended cab, so we can fit everybody in it. So we need something that can hold 4, that we can carry items, and we're looking for something that we don't have to carry a generator around, that they can actually use it to run the equipment. So would one of the vehicles that's out there fit all of those? We've never asked for a new vehicle ever.
Ms. Gage.
I don't know if I'm supposed to respond.
Yeah.
I can respond.
Follow.
Kim, so on that new vehicle that has the plugs, that's the new one that has it has a separate battery that you plug in camera gear to, correct? Or even in computer gear and things like that. And so you need a vehicle that also carries all the equipment
Yeah, so
and the guy.
we're looking for one that had all of it. And so, yeah, so with the canopy, everything in the back, plus it's an extended cab. So, because when we get all of it, there's a lot of equipment.
So the generator makes a ton of noise on top of you trying to film, correct?
Correct.
And from what I've seen, those don't make any noise
No.
because it's plugged into the car.
I first challenged on the choice of the vehicle, but then when they laid it all out, it actually made sense. And again, they were hoping for something that had four-wheel drive just because they've had some slips and some almost accidents in the vehicles they have right now.
Mr. Gass.
I would just say, I mean, I know in recent years, there's been auctions where there's like, I don't know the exact number, over 15 vehicles, I feel like, of city vehicles auctioned off that are in the surplus category. And I went to one a few years ago and, you know, they're not all in as bad a shape as some of the ones she mentioned, so maybe have to look at and see. But with these recent ones, I think there was one recently from the police and some others, and granted, none of them are gonna be brand new, and they're not gonna have all the features needed, but as I said, I think we're aware that we're in a very, very bad financial situation, and I just think the prudent thing to do here would be to see if we could repurpose something from within.
Make a motion.
Your Honor,
Or somebody. I'm sorry, actually, you were.
He can go. He can go.
I move to eliminate the vehicle acquisition from the CIPs of the sales and marketing division.
Second.
Moving second discussion. Mr. Flora.
I have a question for Ms. Simpson. The vehicles that were gifted to you over the years with that roster of really cool stuff, if they hadn't come to you, are those the vehicles that would typically end up being surplus anyway?
Yes, they were surplus vehicles.
Okay, so if we're gonna, before we think about eliminating this, I have a question for staff. How hard would it be to get some historical data on what we've surplused in the past? You said like 15 at a time or something?
I went to one auction before I got on council, so that would have been 3 years ago, and there
Okay.
was at least 15 vehicles.
Because I've looked over the years anecdotally at a few of these auctions. And my very limited experience is what Ms. Simpson just described is what we're selling off at the end. These things are used, typically these municipal vehicles are used to termination. Okay, there's a lot of them are pretty well scrapped. So before we decide whether we should cut this or not, it might be nice to know what's available. If we decide that we need to do this, it would be nice to know, have a little more information on what this department may end up with specifically.
We'd really like something we could come out of the backup.
I think the other, to add to Councilmember Flora's statement is, I would like to know what was spent on maintaining these nightmares, plus the fact that I think we need to also consider the safety of our staff. And who's gonna get in trouble because they're driving around in a vehicle that loses its brakes on the Villa or any other hill for that matter. So, I mean, technically, how much have we spent on maintaining a car that's not, like, shouldn't even be on the road? Compared to what it's gonna cost to purchase a new vehicle with a warranty. That's gonna have basic maintenance. And probably, I'm assuming you don't drive, you're not driving it like the police do, so it's.
No, they don't, no.
It's probably gonna last you 10 times the.
And some of them, because they're not safe in the winter, they're parked.
Yeah.
There's the only one that has four-wheel drive is the one that only carries 2 people.
Mr. Gass, then. So,
Oh, I just had maybe a question for staff. I remember a few meetings ago, I can't remember exactly, there was one, I could look into it, but what was the one we just surplus from the police? That one, I assume, is still in the surplus mode. I don't remember exactly the car, but there was a police department vehicle, I think, that we surplus recently, right?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Gass, there is, the cost of maintenance was exceeding the cost of purchase. So we're getting to the point where we were gonna spend more over the next 2 years repairing it, if it's the vehicle I'm thinking of. At least that was since I've been here.
Are there other departments that have to use hand-me-down cars?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Sorry. Councilmember Kistler, yes, absolutely. Cars are passed around through general government and also KPU. I will note that in this case, a vehicle that might be available is more than likely a general government vehicle, in which KPU, being an enterprise, is going to have to purchase from general government and also needs to make modifications to it. I mean, it would need, at the very least, the wrap on the outside that says KPU. It might need, like if it's a police vehicle, the cage needs to come down. There's going to be some sort of an expense if we're using an internal vehicle. It's not just a free, here you go. So I just want to put that out to the council. We can look into what vehicles might be out there that are being prepared for surplus, coming offline with the purchase of new vehicles, and see if they would suit sales, marketing, and customer services needs. But I can't tell you at this moment if there's any vehicle that's out there that would be suitable or not.
Ms. Bradbury, then Mr.
Does she have a follow-up? She can
Do you have a
go.
follow-up?
It's not a follow-up, it's another question.
You can go.
If you got this new one, which vehicles would you keep?
The only one we would, keep would be the Transit van, which is the 2012. It's the youngest. It's the 10-year-old one, just because we end up sometimes needing a vehicle. Again, like we run the mail or we have things printed at Ketchikan Daily News. I have staff people that need to get around, that actually don't have vehicles themselves. And then when they go on business for KPU, then they end up needing to use a vehicle. So we would get rid of the flatbed. And we've only hung on to that because we need something high, like when we film at the 4th of July, we need that to film there. And again, at the ballparks, we end up using that to film. And so that was the key, is having something with that open big back. But it really can't be used for anything other than that, particularly with the issues that we have starting and not being able to get in on the driver's side. You have to slide in from the passenger side. So yeah, we just hang on to the one, and we would get rid of the 16-year-old Equinox, the 25-year-old flatbed, and the 25-year-old Astrovan.
Ms. Bradbury, then Mr.
Yeah, I was just wondering how often the vehicle, like how many hours in a given week are these vehicles driven?
Which ones?
Your vehicles.
Chris?
Yeah.
So the TV crew use them every day. One of them, depending on what they need, how many people are in there, and whether it's operating or not. And then I would say the other sales and marketing use probably twice a week.
So roughly how many hours a week would we be using it? Like, is it on the road actually being
You're talking about like on the road, or you mean they're out and they're filming and then they're driving back?
on the road?
Driving, I'll have to go back and check, because you drive, you film at a place with it, and then you bring it back. So the purpose of this one would be also to use it as a power source when they're filming. So it's a little bit different. In Ketchikan, I don't think that many people put that many hours on their vehicles in actual driving. It's, I have to be able to get somewhere and then get back.
Understood that.
And
Just
that's,
wondering.
and that's partially why
Roughly
we've got
hours.
these pretty old vehicles that we've been able to drive around. Unfortunately,
Understand that.
water does a number on them too, like the one, actually looks pretty good. It's just the fact that it doesn't open and the water runs around inside the roof. And like I said, when you go downhill, it comes down on your head.
Mr. Madon.
If you were to acquire this vehicle, how long is it out? When would you get it?
When would we get it? We checked, there was availability earlier this fall when we did this in August, September. And they had availability that they would be able to then basically out of Seattle put on the barge, so fairly quickly.
And is there an option looked at for a cheaper vehicle?
They looked specifically for the F-150 extended cab, and we've got quotes for the vehicle. Billingham Ford was 55,115, Frontier Ford was 55,900, Ford Personal was 56,403, Auto Nation Ford was 54,845. Bill Pier Ford was 55,665. And then we did not get responses from 3 others. And this also included the Lyra 100R standard cap. That's 3,300 for wrap. We estimated about 5,000. This included wrapping up the KPU. And if we don't wrap it with the KPU, we could always get a magnetic sticker on the side that says KPT. We don't have to wrap it. And then that was also getting studded snow tires for the vehicle. Base price was right on $55.56.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaston, Ms. Britt.
One last question, Tom, and then I'll be done. And I was gonna call, it looks like Mr. Bynum is about ready to jump out of his chair and tell us he's got the perfect vehicle to hand down. So did you want to relay something, Mr. Bynum?
If it was okay, I wanted to add some insight to the council about the vehicle request, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So I don't want to speak to customer service's specific vehicle needs. I only want to speak to the fact that KPU Electric is responsible for all of KPU vehicles. So we have over 150 pieces of rolling stock that we're responsible for. So anytime we get a hand-me-down vehicle or we have these really old vehicles in our fleet, they impact our ability to provide service, not just for customer service, but electric service. Our priority in electric is our line trucks and our big trucks to make sure we can get out there and do storm recovery when that happens. But every time we get a hand-me-down vehicle, our department becomes responsible for that vehicle, whether or not we're doing the repairs, the brake jobs, all of the major part replacements when the bottoms are rusted out. That comes onto us, and or we're responsible for outsourcing that within the community. So they actually become a burden to electric division. So a $50,000 vehicle or whatever it is that their request is, if that's taking away 2 derelict vehicles away from their department, that's taking away 2 or 3 from electric division's responsibility. And right now I have 1 mechanic. He's responsible for all of those vehicles. And we can bring some mechanics specifically for dealing with vehicles. We can get some help in the shop if we need to, or, outsource and ask for help from other departments, but that burden comes onto us. So when we're talking about vehicles, whether it's customer service or telecom or water, that impacts electric. And so I thought it'd be pertinent to this specific question at hand, instead of waiting until I got here for
So the second half, that was my question. My final comment would just be that, as was stated, we're looking at a $3.2 million draw in reserves in KPU. I wish every department could have the best equipment. I wish every person could have the best vehicle, including myself. I can't afford it. And quite frankly, I don't think we can afford this or many other things right now. So that's why I think we have to make some tough decisions now while we get our rate study, while we get all that stuff in place. So that's my reasoning on why I think the prudent thing to do is to put this off.
Oh, and the only one on this table who actually knows what they're talking about when it comes to vehicles is to my right. I think his suggestion was probably the most wise one to find out what's there and go for it. I just wanted to, from my own personal experience before I joined the council, I went to just about every KPU or not KPU, city vehicle sale. It was incredible how many vehicles I saw that I thought, I wouldn't drive that. I wouldn't put that on the road. In fact, actually, it kind of pissed me off. Why are they even, this should be on the barge. And I think too often we make this assumption, well, the vehicles run fine for 10 years or 5 years or 27 years or whatever. Well, let's just get a little more push out of it. And, yeah, do I think $60,000 is high for a pickup truck? Absolutely. I also know my son was looking at pickup trucks a while back, and guess what? 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. I saw a Jeep Wagoneer for $110,000 the other day. Sometimes we can, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I used to have Jeeps. Yeah, it's, I mean, we need to make sure that we're not, A, putting people in danger, B, creating worse situations. We can nickel and dime stuff, and this is one of those cases. And yeah, and every council I've ever been on, whenever you bring a car up, someone goes, "Oh my God, that's too much. Why are we spending that kind of money?" We don't flinch when KPU comes to us asking for a blah 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 Zippo zingy thing for $6 million. But gosh, we know that trucks cost too much. That minivan costs too much. Let's just make the right decision. Anyway, anyone else want anything else?
So I was gonna say, somebody who personally bought the exact truck that she's mentioning, I think 67,000 is a little too high for it. I also am wondering, obviously this has like everything you could possibly want plus some. And I'm wondering maybe we look at something that is just maybe on the used side versus brand new. I mean, we approved 66,000 for a police cruiser. And so I have a hard time approving more for this vehicle than we were willing to do for a police cruiser. That has to deal with public safety, and that's, top priority for our community. So I just have a hard time with the dollar figure, and would like to see it go back to the drawing board to see what other options are out there besides the absolute perfect, brand new, all bells and whistles and everything else. So that was my only thing I
So if I
put
eliminate
out
the
there.
truck wrap, that eliminates 5,000. The truck itself is 56,000. We prudently included the cost of getting it here and the snow tires, which some other people, when they do their truck requests, do not. So if I eliminate the snow tires and just use the tires, eliminate the truck wrap, we need a canopy on the back. But that would take 6,600 off of so it would go down to about 60 to get it here, including so that would be the AML shipping, getting a canopy on the back.
Ms. Kistler, then Mr.
Yeah, what I see with this truck is a multi-purpose vehicle, that they're not, instead of getting a runaround car and maybe, a specific things that it can do, it seems like this vehicle is going to check off a lot of boxes. And KPU does a lot of good stuff for Ketchikan. There are people that watch the KPU videos from probably all around the world. It's important work, I think, that KPU is doing with marketing Ketchikan and getting the word out and thing. And I think they need to have a dependable car and vehicle. And I think a utility vehicle like this is a wise choice. And being able to plug in to the vehicle, and it's going to make everything more efficient. They're going to be able to do more with this vehicle, I think. And it's the sales and marketing, and how can you market with a hunk of junk? I don't know that. But I can see the value in getting this vehicle.
Mr. Finnegan, then Ms. Gage.
I'm just curious what the course of action would be if 2 or 3 of these vehicles you're using now are no longer usable over the course of this winter, if they just finally hit the end of their life cycle and were no longer functional.
Well, the intent is if we get this, is to immediately scrap 3 of them and put them into we'll put them out for auction, probably in the next auction.
If I may, just in the event that this vehicle wasn't available to you and those cars, those vehicles were no longer functional, how would you proceed with the work that your team is currently doing?
They would just have to use whatever was available.
Thank you.
Ms. Gage.
So in my little research in the last year, because I was looking for another car for my husband to drive, and I got a 5-year-old Jeep because they are 100,000. I was looking at getting another Toyota, which actually has a similar, battery system that you could plug in quietly, anything from the back end, like camping. The, rate for that particular vehicle was, used was 60,000. The benefit of what they do and a generator, is the fact that you have, camera crew who is now working with a loud, obnoxious, generator, and which then also has to be weeded out of their filming. The, I just can't, see, and I get it, but, vehicles the last couple of years have been, they're sitting at 60, 55 and up. Even used ones are in the 30s. They're not, definitely not getting cheaper. But for what I'm seeing is, and what I'm figuring is based on what you spend on that vehicle and what the cost of maintenance is of all of those garbage vehicles for the next 3 years, you're gonna make up for getting a new car that is just going to need basic, care over the next 5 to 6 years with warranties. I mean, mine goes in and gets its oil changed every couple of, 6 months. But I think the safety of, our staff is, extremely important also, and not being able to get out of the driver's seat if there was an emergency, that's, in my opinion, unacceptable. And so I'm gonna support Kim's vehicle because I think it's important that everybody be driving something that's not dangerous.
Okay, Ms. Bradbury, Mr. Tony, then Ms.
I was gonna see if we could defer this until Thursday to see if the staff could get some, or no, Wednesday. Sorry, I forgot about Wednesday's meeting. To Wednesday, so we can kind of gauge, is there any surplus vehicles out there that, we've looked at through this process that we've approved? And just kind of gauge the full field, maybe look at some other options besides this brand new one, see if there's something else a little bit cheaper. And just defer this to Wednesday and to allow for the information that Councilmember Flora had mentioned and things like that. Because there might not be a surplus vehicle appropriate, or there might be other options. So I'm just asking to defer this until Wednesday for more information.
Mr. Mayor, councilors, so my recommendation would be, how much money do you want us to spend? And what I mean by that is whether or not we get a used vehicle or a surplus vehicle or a brand new vehicle. Is the discomfort with something brand new at $67,000? Because if that's the case, then do we have 50 to work with? Do we have 40? What is it you want to work with? Because I'll be honest right now, knowing that there are employees in unsafe vehicles makes me sick to my stomach just at this moment. And so something needs to get allocated in this budget. And if the discomfort's just because it is a brand new vehicle and we don't want to spend up to $67,000, obviously something needs to be taken care of to make our employees safe. So it can't just be a blanket, if it's just because it's new, we need something. Something has to happen. If that
Mr.
makes
Tony.
sense.
Want me to clarify my deferral?
Well,
Go ahead.
Actually, do you want to speak on a deferral or is?
I was just gonna clarify my deferral.
No, let her, mine is a different question.
So my intention was just to go back to see, are there any surplus vehicles currently available for,
Surplus city of Ketchikan?
yes, city surplus vehicles.
Or, I'm sorry, city or KP?
Oh.
Because city.
City or KPU surplus
Because-
vehicles
Because the
available.
city one's actually gonna cost KPU.
So
So-
I'm just looking, I want to defer this because I want to know, are there any vehicles available? Surplus, city or KPU surplus vehicles available or not? If the answer is no, I would be willing to amend my motion, but at this time, I would just like to defer this.
Make a
Until we
motion,
get that.
make a motion.
I motion to defer this.
Well,
I amend,
on a motion to defer.
Okay.
can be up
So
she's deferring the motion on the floor till Wednesday.
to Wednesday.
is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Flora,
Yes.
Yeah.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
and Kistler.
Yes.
Motion to defer passes. Okay, so any other, Mr. Matani?
You mentioned other vehicles in the range of 50 to 55,000. If after the deferral, we find that there is no vehicle that's appropriate for your department, if we reduce the budget and give you 50,000 instead of 67,000, can you work with that?
I can have them call around and check tomorrow. I mean, the vehicle itself was 55,000. That was the cost of the vehicle. It's the getting snow tires, so we don't have to get snow tires instead of tires. We'll tell them no. We don't have to put the KPU wrap on it. We'll just get a magnetic thing that goes on the side. However, we do have to get it here on a barge, and that's gonna be $1,700. But the cost of the vehicle was 55.
Thank you.
It's perfect.
Your Honor, I would like to remove, or, no, let's see, there's 39. So 635.12, I would like to reduce that to $39,260 per manager's comments.
Which one is this?
You want to tell us what it is?
635.12, technical services on F8, midway down, F8.
Is that an customer service?
Technical services.
Technical
F8, 635.12, technical services. I would like to reduce that from $54,260 to $39,260.
Second.
What does that actually
15,000.
accomplish?
It's what she recommended.
That's my recommendation.
Yeah.
That was,
There's two recommendations that I was just gonna follow
Yeah.
through with what
yes,
she.
no, but there's a lot of talk. I just want to make sure that the public knew what we were doing. And me too. Further discussion? Clerk will call the roll.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani,
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury,
Yes.
Kistler,
Yes.
Flora,
Yeah.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Amendment passes.
Your Honor, I would like on F8, 790.15, furniture and fixtures, I would like to reduce it from $10,000 to $1,500.
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Flora.
Yeah.
Finnegan,
Yes.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani.
Yes.
Gage,
Yes.
Bradbury.
Yes.
Kistler.
Yes.
Motion passes. Anything else? Mr. Matani?
Personal services and benefits increased by 132,848. This is for your new IPTV camera technician, correct?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Matani, that's the position as well as the absorbed pay increases, correct? It's not just one
Correct,
position.
that's correct.
It's also the pay increases that were granted to staff.
My question on that is, will that bring down the temporary wages?
I did reduce the temporary wages. I reduced them by 18,500.
Okay, thank
I
you.
left 10,000 in there just as a, in case it takes a while for us to find somebody. I'm hoping to be able to at least have some people in place some temps lower, trying to find an appropriate.
Mr. Matani?
Just a comment to the manager. I mean, KPU has reduced the bank charges by 8%. Has the rest of the city departments looked at processing that will reduce the other departments as well?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Matani, not yet. No, we have that on our list of things to do, but not in the last 2 weeks.
Add something to that. The Paymentus right now is only addressing PayPal, and then, of course, it takes time. The other big chunk of that would then flow over to the utility. It doesn't necessarily flow over to Port and Harbors, because they have a totally different system. So one, it's gonna take time to implement. That's a big, huge project. It's not just a quick thing. And then the other services that could possibly flow into that. So possible landfill could flow into that. It just depends. And anyway, so I didn't think that everybody's going to be able to qualify for putting all of their bill payment on Paymentus. It may not necessarily work for every single billing that we do.
But to add to that again, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Matani, it is something that we're looking into for this year. That's a directive that we have from council to check into our bank charges if we can negotiate lower rates.
Ms. Castor, you
That answered my question. I thought you had said that the city was gonna use the same system somehow too, so. But I do have a question on the, you have a goal for 2023 about the Wi-Fi, letting them know when devices need upgrade. What is that?
The managed Wi-Fi?
I guess, yeah, manage Wi-Fi. It'll allow them to manage their own internet connected devices.
Yes, yeah, so managed Wi-Fi, it allows, so there's a typical router that you would have, and then we have a managed Wi-Fi that we sell, and we've been testing a lot of different flavors of it, and we think we found the right one where people could actually manage it somewhat themselves. So if they're tired of the kids being on the internet right now, they can just basically click it off. Or sometimes you can limit devices. So we've been trying to find the right solution. And so there's an app that would allow people to be able to help manage the Wi-Fi in addition to if there's an issue, like we can easily go in and see. Some of them will even tell you like if a particular device attached needs to be like have software upgrade. So there's just some different things that come up.
Mr. Tubbs.
Yeah, 640.04. Can you explain that 131,000 a little further? Management and consulting services.
Minutes. So a cool thing about mine is that you actually go to the section in the back, I list everything that is within each category. Because sometimes it's confusing, you'll have the same vendor name in two different places, but it depends on what the service is. So under 640.04, you go to F11, so that is management consulting, so Pivot Group, quality assurance. That's, we have a group that calls, they do follow-up calls on every single service call we do and every install. Hiring solutions, that is a testing group that I use. So we have independent film editors that help us with the editing of all the video that we do. And then OSG billing, that does the electric and the telecom bill print vendor, as well as there's a messaging vendor done through that. And that's primarily what it is in there.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunn.
600.01 travel business and 600.03, 14,200. Any of the travel business associated with the training and education?
So 601?
Yeah.
That one is primarily travel to like digital marketing, to the board meetings. I'm on a national telecom board. So it's Alaska Telephone Association. If you go down to 603, that is, we actually bring a trainer in here that trains the KPU customer service group and the support desk. It's much more economical to bring a single person in and for multiple days. And then the 603 also includes Cisco training, which will be done online by a couple of my employees.
Thank you.
Other questions regarding sales, marketing, and customer service? Okay. Let's move on to electric.
Council, Mayor, Council, Madam Clerk, staff here helping out. I just wanted to give a real quick overview of what we've got going on in Electric Division. I'm not exactly sure how much time I have, what I have here, but I'm
Have
gonna
as much time as you need.
Well, I appreciate that. I'll try to make it brief though. So I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview of what's happening in Electric Division as we look into the future. And you've heard many times from our manager, Mrs. Walsh, that there really is some vision setting that we have to do about how we have to look into the future and make some changes for us to be successful. And I'll touch on a few of those tonight. If you look, we're looking through your budget, one of the items for our goals for 23, I really wanted to point out that I wanted to focus on our personnel. Our people are the most important asset that we have in our utility. I feel like that over the many years, we've neglected our employee, not just from pay equity perspective, but from the things that I as a manager and the utility can do to make their jobs easier and make them perform better. Specifically, refocusing our efforts in what we're doing for training of staff and coming up with organized training for our staff. I feel that having an effective training program that we identify the specific needs of our staff is really important, and it has been neglected for many years. Don't know that we're going to be able to fix this problem in just 1 year. It's going to take a lot of work and effort and organization with our management team to make that happen. Second thing is the succession planning within our utility. I believe that's not just a problem within electric, but I see it on a day-to-day basis in our electric utility, as far as our succession planning and where we're going as we look forward with our staff. And then the next item would be reorganizing how we do business, being more effective in using our staff in an appropriate way. Right now, we're pretty thin on staff. We're currently, this past year, we've been operating at 77% of our authorized FTE. And I would say that we're not going to solve this in this budget right now, that 100% of FTE, which is authorized in this budget, is the amount of employees that we need to do status quo, fight the fires as they come, and not really solve all of our capital needs as we move forward and our actual O&M needs. So we're 77% of what's authorized. I would say that we're really 64% of what we should have in order to be able to move some of those initiatives forward. Our work capacity over this past year, meaning that's actual bodies that are physically here to work, has been 60% utility. So when we start talking about succession planning and what we need for staff, that's going to be really important for us to be successful, not in just keeping the lights on, but for us actually achieving our major goals of capital investment as we move forward. So I think that those are some of the most important things that we can do. And as you've heard the manager mention, the strategic plan is going to be an important component of that. And we're going to work really close with our new manager and our assistant manager to ensure that that vision meets those future needs. Comprehensive long-term capital has been something that has been really needed in our utility for a very long time. And I'm going to be honest with you tonight and tell you, our capital program, where it sits today, scares me. Not just from the condition of our assets, but the condition of the actual capital plan itself. So we're going to have a lot of work ahead of us in 23, really identifying not just the very specific needs of each individual component within our system, but what that actual long-term capital strategy looks like. As I go through the budget and talk a little bit about numbers, there'll be some things I'll talk about that we currently aren't doing, but I'm hoping that we will be doing specifically when we're addressing how we fund our capital as we move forward. Rates were mentioned earlier, and I don't want to be just really go back to that for a second because I want to make sure we had a clear picture of where we were with rates. And we're talking about residential rates. In 2010, our electric rates were 9.6 cents. And there was a request to increase our rates by 2.1% that year That motion failed. That was ordinance 10-1643, failed. 2016, ordinance 16-8. So I wouldn't have to break out the glasses. 1805 requested a 5% rate increase. That passed. That brought our rate to 10.1 cents. In 2018, ordinance 1869 was a 5% request. That passed, brought our rate to 10.6 cents. 2020, ordinance 1888, that was a 3.5% rate increase. That brought our rate to 10.9 cents. In 2020, ordinance 1924, that was a 1.5% rate increase. That was specifically put in place to accommodate the previous SEPA rate increase. That was 1.5%. That passed. That brought us to our current electric rate of 11.09 cents. Now, I've worked with the manager. We've looked at the history of our rates here. And when we go back and look at just the last 15 years or so, if we were to keep up with rate setting policies of other similar sized utilities, we're about 2.5 cents behind where we really should be in order for us to effectively fund our utility. So as we move forward, we look at where are we spending our money this year? Where have we spent our money in the past? So I just wanted to kind of cover some highlights. Of our operations budget, we have an increase in our budget of $2.1 million. That's an 11% increase. And of our capital improvement plan, we have what's listed here as a $1.58 million increase. That's a 36.7% increase in our capital. But that really isn't a true increase in capital, and I'll explain when I get to the capital section. But I'd really like to talk a little bit about our operations budget first. And again, one of our most important assets that we have is our people, and that really is where we've spent most of our money. In all of the money we're spending, $1.3 million of the 2.1 that we're going to increase in spending. 1.3 of that's for people. That's just our wages. That's the last contract that you passed. I think that was a good start in getting us in the right direction and figuring out how we can get on a good path to have proper succession planning, getting appropriate people in. But I don't believe that this really is going to be where we need to be as we look into the future with our strategic plan. That's where the bulk of our increase went in operations. The second component of increase in our budget for operations was our purchase power. And that's something that's outside of our control. We sell power to the customer. Half of that power comes from our facilities. The other half of that comes from purchase power. So one of the things that we've seen occur over this past year is we've seen a significant increase in electric usage for 2022. That helps us on the revenue side, no doubt, but our expenses go up when that occurs. So that'll be one of those areas where we know that when we look into 2023, that we have to have an increase, and again, it's outside of my control. One of the other items that we have in our budget that was a significant increase was our technical services, and that was a 62% increase of $300,000. What this money is for basically our tree contracts. As you're aware, in 2022, we were unable to achieve getting a tree contract out. We tried twice. We increased our request out there for bids by over $100,000, and we were still unsuccessful in getting a tree contract. This is a very concerning thing for us. As you know, the alders here love to grow with all the rain we get. And without a good tree trimming program, we'll spend this money in overtime just with outages and loss of power to customers. So this is really an important component as we move forward. We're going to work really hard to ensure that we can have a tree contract as we move into 2023. We'll come up with strategies if we're unsuccessful in bidding again on how we can achieve this. But this is definitely something we're going to have to address. The other item that's outside of my control with electric division is our interdepartmental charges. Obviously, most of those interdepartmental charges are associated with personnel. As personnel costs go up and cost of living, so will that expense for us in the utility. Those are primarily the big items within our actual budget that demonstrate that $2.15 million increase, the 11%. One of the things that I wanted to also point out as I go to start to talk about capital is that our capital budget currently, we fund it out of our appropriated reserve. We don't currently have a specific capital dedicated plan or a program or savings for our capital. We just share it with the reserve. And so normally what we would see is a dedicated expense of our operations expense to forward fund a capital account. That money would be sitting in the capital account for future capital needs. And then our capital plan would be a 30-year plan. That account will grow and go down as the needs of capital come in front of us. But we don't currently do that. What we've done in the years past is that we established this 5-year capital plan. It's a firefighter plan, meaning I don't have the staff, to be honest with you, to really execute a full, robust capital plan. It takes people to execute. And our execution has been really poor. And so that's why I'm talking with the manager, when we talk about the succession planning, we talk about training, we talk about appropriate staff in the right places. We have to have that to execute. So there's portions of our capital which is performed by our own staff, and then there's major projects that need to be bid out on the street. We don't have the expertise. For example, rewinds. Those are things that we don't do in-house, but it takes in-house staff dedicated to that rewind to make it successful. So when we look at our capital, you'll see that in previous years, every year, we under-execute on capital. And what happens is that we reappropriate it to move it forward into the next year. But because we're just pulling from reserves and we don't have dedicated capital accounts specifically dedicated for that purpose, what'll happen is that the amount of money I'm asking for in that year is too much, and it typically gets reduced. So when we look at our capital account this year, for example, get on the right page. Delay here. I'm just going to jump to G13, which is kind of the overview of our capital. We'll look at our capital, and our capital account says that we're reappropriating $2.89 million. Okay? That means that was something, a project that I had listed for this year, that because market conditions, the cost of goods, the ability to get contractors, and my staffing, I was unable to execute. So that's an under execution on our part for trying to get capital done. So the process is we reappropriate and you pray that you don't get new funding cut, which has been what has happened in the past. And that's why we'll see that we don't have these large capital expenditures in the past. What happens, it just gets pushed. And then all the things that, like this year, that seem really big that we're pushing to next year. Next year comes along, we don't have the appropriate staffing. This process will continue. And then before you know it, you get to pushing things so far down the road that those things that seemed smaller just drop off the list altogether because we're not going to get to it. A rewind is more important. Dealing with a roof on a building that's leaking in the powerhouse is more important. Trying to figure out what we're going to be doing with storage of materials is more important. So this becomes a cascading effect. So if we're cutting capital tonight, just know that when we cut capital, we're not saving any money. We're only costing us more money into the future and putting us at risk. Now, as a council, one of the things you're going to ask is, how do I know that, what those risks are? And that's one of those things that when I was talking about working with this comprehensive capital plan with the manager, that we're going to have to identify for you to let you know what those risk matrix are, and to tell you that when you decide that you're going to say no this year to push it to next year, what the actual risk to this utility is going to be. So something we're going to be working really hard on, and we're going to try to get that sooner or later, I hope, because I think it's really important for us as we move into 23 and then start planning for 24. $2.89 million of reappropriated money. So that means that our new money that we asked for was $2.99 million, meaning that we had this capital budget of $5.88 million, which when you look at the percentages, it looks like because this year, or 2022, I was asking for $4.37 million was the amended budget, but I'm only spending $1.2 million. So I'm pushing everything forward. But it says new adopted 23 to 22 was an additional 1.5 million, which says 36% growth in my capital program. There's no growth at all, which is the way that it shows on the balance sheet here. All we're doing is pushing our labor down the road and our needs down the road. There is no growth in our capital program. Our capital program is way behind. So we'll have to come up with some strategies on how we can solve that as we move forward in the future. And again, if we're taking our operations budget and making a line item expense in our operations budget for capital as a forward funded levelized expense, it's really going to help us decide with the manager when we start talking about rate setting on how we can set effective rates and how we can control them as we move forward. As you've seen from 2010 to current, we've only raised the rate 1.6 cents. That has an effect. KPU is, and I know you've heard it before, the lowest electric rate in the state of Alaska by far. We're in the bottom 10% in the country as a whole. Now that sounds like something that is to say that's a great thing. It's a great thing for our residents, but it comes at an expense to our residents at some point. So the firefighting at some point will become disaster control. And this budget that we have in front of you now is basically carrying on our ability to do firefighting, basically, status quo. We're not solving the big problems that we need to be solving with this budget, but I don't have all the information. We haven't worked out all the details to give you what we're gonna need to be asking for and setting appropriate rates to do that in the future. That's all I had for presenting the budget. I'm open to any questions.
So if you were to just pick a number, I'm not gonna say pick a number, but I'm gonna say pick a number. What if you were to raise the rates to cover where you're at right now, what would you raise it to?
If I were to raise,
2.5?
you're asking me just to put my finger in here and guess what my rates need to be today to cover our future costs with what I believe we need for organization. They're going to be somewhere around what you see in the rest of the state, 13 to 13.5 cents. But it wouldn't be prudent for me to give you that exact number and say, let's act on that, because we need to do our work to make sure that that's the case.
But if we were to raise it while we're working on the rate study, would that take some of the pressure off?
It would take some of the pressure off the electric utility.
Yeah.
I can't speak to the fact on whether or not, how that would impact us as far as how we go through this rate setting process. But I can assure you that even if you raise it a penny or a penny and a half, and I'm not obviously saying we're going to go ahead and do that without some real conversation, that we're not going to be where we need to be as we look at what our needs are going to be as we go into 23 and 24 in the future.
And just to pull on that thread a little bit more, Mr. Mayor and Councilor Gage, that's really, even if it's a 1% increase or a 3% increase or an additional, the 1.5 plus maybe another 1%, that would be helpful to at least help us keep moving forward. But just as Jeremy mentioned, we do have to do a full rate policy and kind of to expand on what Councilor Gass was asking, you can even look at, we're going to start charging a higher access charge. So everybody has the initial rate, or lower access charge and base everything volumetrically, or we're going to recover all our fixed costs on a monthly connection charge, whether it be $8 or $7. And then everything that's volumetric based, then we change the rate. So there's a lot that we can do within rate design to push the burden on those who are really using the system.
Well, and I understand that.
Not our residents.
I think I've been stuck on that. We need to make a plan to make increments, because our rates don't keep up with wages, let alone medical insurance and all of the things that will go up no matter what. And I don't really want to be in a disaster situation. I'm actually really tired of the, stopping leaks and sticking my finger in the dam you know, so I'm looking forward to the rate study, but I'm also thinking, you know, there's probably some give or take there.
So just as an example, and I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but I can only kind of give you an idea of what other major utilities are doing. We look at Seattle City and Light, they already have programmed out for the next 3 years, rate increases that are beyond 5% a year. Up in Juneau, the utility there is doing exactly the same thing over the next 3 years. They already have programmed out rates that are well beyond over that 3-year period, a 10% rate increase. And that's not unique. Every utility that's doing rate setting and evaluation of what their current personnel needs are, operation costs, and their long-term capital, all their rates are increasing right now. The only one that hasn't effectively done that is truly our utility here, at least in Southeast Alaska.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I'm quiet. I know, shocking.
No, I just, I was taking the pen twiddle. See, he doesn't.
I'll put the pen down, sorry.
Your Honor.
Mr. Matano.
Two small ones here. Travel and training, 22,000. Travel, training and education, 25,000.
I told you wouldn't believe me. No, I'm kidding with you. I think you should double it, actually. I don't think it's enough. But that's where we're at to try to keep things under control.
Mr. Matano.
75,000 moving expenses.
As I had indicated earlier, we're operating at 77% staff. I have 10 vacancies currently, and that's just to get us to the bare minimum. Every time we go to bring an employee here, we're having to pay up to $15,000 of moving expenses. And I can assure you that that $15,000 of moving expenses is not a big carrot to get a bunch of people to run here. I've looked at over 150 resumes and applications over the last month of people applying for jobs, whether they're mechanics or electricians, and I can assure you that none of them are qualified, not even close. So there's really, when we talk about succession planning, this is going to be one of those things that we're going to have a hard discussion about what we need to do, not only to bring qualified people here, but to develop people from within our community. But that's easy to say. Having an appropriate training program, apprenticeships within our utility that are non-linemen are going to be a lot of work for us. And the reason why I say that is because they're not specifically dedicated apprenticeships within the state IBEW program for our mechanics, for example, or our operators, or powerhouse utility electricians. They do have electrician apprenticeships. They do have lineman apprenticeships. But those electrical apprenticeships they don't directly translate into electric utility. So we've got some real work to do with that. When we start growing from within the community, we can cut down some of those costs, right? We can start retaining employees. But that is going to be a very hard lift that I can assure you that at 60% capacity right now, we're not going to achieve. So we've got to have some really tough conversations about how we move forward to successfully develop those programs, and we're going to need some help.
Did you say of your 10 vacant positions and 150 applicants, you had 0 qualified applicants?
The most recent applicants that I looked at, that is 100% correct. Now, we have hired 2 positions. A couple months ago, I went through a big round of these, and I did hire an operator, which we'll introduce when he actually gets onboarded. We're hoping it's this month. He comes with some real operator experience. His desire to come here is not a financial desire. It's a desire to get out of the lower 48 and come to Alaska. So his wife is on board, which is a rarity for a lot of those applicants. And then we also are bringing on a lineman apprentice, again, growing from within the community, because I have a program available to do that. But of all the other applicants that I went through, it's very slim pickings. And even if I took a flyer on some of these applicants, we're putting ourselves at a lot of risk to fly people here, to onboard them. And then now with as an example, in my electric shop, I have 3 guys right now that are main electric shop, they're maintaining our powerhouses. They're doing our substation work. They're doing all of our harbors. They're doing all the meters for our thousands of 7,000 plus customers. 3 guys doing all that. So when I bring somebody in right now that has no clue what's happening in this utility, has no utility experience, one of those guys now is trying to train this person up. And they're struggling for training. They're looking for training opportunities, but I just frankly can't send them because I can't afford to lose another guy. So we're caught in this really bad cycle right now. And that's just one example with the electric shop. I mean, I have problems, with a lot of the other positions too. It's the same example. Everybody is stretched very thin right now, and it's going to take a lot of work for us to get them. I don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers right now. Just letting you know, there is a problem, and it's serious. And we have a lot of hard work to do to really define how serious it is. I can't even tell you how serious it is, but it is a serious problem. This budget is going to get us into 23 as far as the appropriation portion of this, and then the authorization stuff as we need it. We'll come back to you and ask for it. And so that's where we're at. We got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of good people though. They love it here. They love the utility, and they stay because they love this community. They don't stay because of the pay, and they sure don't stay because of that it's an easy job. It sure is. Sorry, got a little off track there.
Questions or motions or electric? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're a little over, so let's go on to, we'll pick up with, I guess, telecom next time. Let's go ahead and go on to mayor and council comments.
Before we move on, can we bring the electric division manager up again before we go on to telecom next week?
Well, do you have a question for him now? Maybe.
No, it'll be an extensive question.
Okay, well, not kind of, yes. Can you come back on Wednesday?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You shouldn't have answered so quickly, because important thing, I'm leaving town tomorrow. Okay, council member comments, Ms. Bradbury.
Well, I'm happy to be back. It's nice to be in the room doing this versus
No,
there.
no, it was nice to be on.
Well, I mean, it was nice to be, feet up on the computer versus this, but I'm glad to be back. I just want to let other council members know that I did receive a little bit of information on my item that I asked for on November 21st. It's still not complete, but hopefully we'll see that be completed in the next day, hopefully. I found it quite interesting, the information that I've already seen so far, so hopefully you guys find that information on travel and training interesting as well. I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of frustrated with this process, this go around in terms of budget, and people might think I'm being harsh or whatnot, but I just feel like there's a lot of resistance in gathering information about the budget and what we're spending money on, and understanding if it's being tracked or not being tracked. As I've found out with travel and training, it's not very well tracked, and it's super concerning because it's there's just one line item out of all of them, and there's quite a bit of money that goes into that, and the fact that nobody's keeping track of it or making sure the travel and training is legitimate and that it's being spread out amongst our staff and not just one person constantly going. So it's a little frustrating and concerning that that's the issue. But I'm hopeful that in the new year that we could really, us as a body, hunker down on the policies and setting policies forward to ensure those checks and balances are put into place. I know I'm not here to micromanage. I hate being micromanaged, but our duty is to ensure that the money is being spent well, is being tracked, and that when somebody asks for information on where our money is, we know where it's at. And so for me, that is a newfound goal for the rest of my term, but it has been just super frustrating going through this process with that kind of wall there. I'm also, I understand the intention of placeholders, but I feel like we're saying like, hey, we're in this deficit, but don't worry, we have these placeholders, so we're really not in a deficit. And I think to the public, it's coming off like, where is that money then? If we're not really in a deficit, but yet we're saying we're in a deficit, like where, I just think that confusion with the public is there. I sure feel it from this side as well. I don't do this big of budgets, but I do multi-million-dollar budgets, and I just don't, the concept of placeholders when you're in a deficit just really doesn't play in my mind. So I truly wonder what is our physical status of the city in terms of what actually, are we spending, what is in our reserves, and just the general, I mean, we hear it all the time, well, we don't spend our whole budget, so don't worry about it. But what are those actual figures? And again, how are we being held accountable for that? And then the last thing, it's just general reminder, just be mindful when other people are speaking and try not to interrupt. Even small whispers can be really distracting, especially on those mics. I hear every conversation that's said in this room. And so the public's hearing that. And so it can be really distracting when somebody's trying to talk and you have whispers going on, even in the back as well. And just making sure if we're at the dais that, I did ask for my cell phone out for a calculator today, but I see a lot of cell phone usage when I would really like people to pay attention to what others are saying. One thing I learned at AML in my conflict resolution class is pay attention, eye contact as much as you can. And not fidget, which I'm working on not fidgeting. Fidgeting is really hard, but that's just things that apparently they say you should work on for things like that. So just sharing some tidbits. And then I'll have quite a few reports for you guys for next meeting from all of my committees that I have been in the last couple of weeks since I haven't been here. I think that's all. Welcome back.
Ms. Gage.
I don't really have anything. I did send the manager and Lacey some information on a program that's being looked at to monitor and assist with Airbnb kind of rentals. It is a database that can be implemented by municipalities in the way that the customer, it's set up for the customer, which is the borough or city or both. And then people who we would have to look at our ordinances on those things. And then they implement the database so that they would sign up. And that way you actually have a running list and a way to track whether or not a building is actually up to code for having people stay in there. It actually put in a lot of safety mechanisms per what the fire marshal and chief was talking about. So that was a really interesting workshop I went to. So they emailed me the stuff today. So other than that, I don't really have a lot.
Mr. Gass.
Thank you to the staff for all the work going into all this. Sure seems like this budget is kind of a lot more of an eye opener or whatever you want to call it, but it's kind of the harsh reality we're seeing and where we're at. And Jeremy kind of laid it out pretty good, but we sure got a lot of work ahead to try to figure out how can we keep things affordable. How can we have a long-term plan that's going to keep our equipment up to date and everything moving that needs to be moving? So looking forward to the rate studies and all that, so we can come up with a plan to try to make this a little more, get everything set in place a little better, but it's definitely not gonna be easy for anybody. There was one good point that was brought up earlier from the ports director when we were talking about the wages for the seasonal employees. He said, well, we're certainly not gonna go backwards. And that kind of stood out to me as something we could keep in mind in pretty much everything we spend is once we increase something, it's pretty much going to be that way forever. So whatever the issue might be, whether it's crossing guards or whatever other issue, that's a good thing to keep in mind. Once the employees and the public and everybody is used to a service or a wage or a expense, it's almost never going to go back. So that's something we can keep in mind as we try to work towards more balanced budgets. And then on the topic of the vehicle, you know, I don't mean to come across as a grouch or something, or to imply that the employees shouldn't have good vehicles. I just think that there are, I mean, as was stated at the start of this budget, on the KPU side, we're looking at a $3.2 million deficit. We don't want to lay people off. We don't want our equipment to fail. Where's a place where we can look? That was what made sense to me. And albeit I don't have near the experience of Mark, I'd like to think I know a little bit about vehicles. So I may have presented that a little bit, Your Honor. But other than that, that's about all I got. We've got one more meeting, and maybe we can all think of a few areas where we might make up a few savings before we pass these budgets.
Mr. Finnegan.
Very shortly, I just want to say I'm grateful that we are anticipating this rate policy work and the rate study itself. Obviously, it's much needed, and it's going to have a huge impact on the future of our utility in this town. That's all.
Mr. Vitale.
Thank you to the staff for getting us here every budget session, every city council meeting. I have to agree with Councilwoman Bradbury. I've been harping on training and travel ever since this budget session started. We need to streamline it, maybe department-wise totally, not individual departments, and track it. Right now, I feel we don't get enough information of where the money is, where it's going, and who is using the travel benefits. Is it one person, two people, or is it department-wide? Who's using the training? So yeah, that is an area I've been harping on. We need to monitor. The other area I've been harping on is bank charges. As a city, or if it was a corporation, we spend a lot of money with the banks. We can negotiate those rates. On the other hand, with capital projects, yeah, they are necessary. However, we are just coming out of a pandemic, and we are looking at 2.2 million, 2.75 million in deficits. We need to make very difficult decisions. I know if we had billions of dollars, we'd fund everybody. We give new vehicles to everybody. But the reality is we still have a lot of work to do before we come out of this issue that we've gone under the last few years. It'll take patience, it'll take sacrifice, and we need to do that. We need to do our fiduciary duty. Even throughout the pandemic, we never cut any employees. It's not about cutting employees. It's about being smart where we cut funding and what we need now, and make these smart decisions now that we secure the future of the city. And also the rate study and the rate structure, I think it needs to be done sooner than later, because that affects the entire city. It affects KPU, it affects every area. The sooner we have it on board, the sooner we implement it, so the public knows what the reality is. And by implementing those rates, by doing the study, we need to be transparent to the public. And we cannot be just raising rates, the mill rate, or taxes in any area and socking it to the public. We need to be transparent. We need to be smart. that even city, the residents of the city are coming out of a very difficult time. I mean, look at people being thrown out of their houses. I mean, the homeless issues we are facing. We cannot be taxing them over and over again. Doesn't matter whether it's in the tourist industry or the lumber industry or the fishing industry or the marijuana industry. We need to be smart about protecting the citizens of Ketchikan. Thank you, Your Honor.
Kissler.
I just want to say that some of the stuff that was on the KPU accomplishments for 2022 was very cool. They did a lot of great things. They figured out how to do sporting events with 2 cameras and be able to switch back and forth because they only had one person, being innovative and first place for overall excellence. And they're doing a lot of good things. On the, just a little note on cars, I paid $2,000 over list price for a used vehicle this summer, and I snatched it up. I replaced an almost 20-year-old car, you know? There's only so long you can depend on. If you're dependent on your vehicle, you need to get something before it breaks down, not when it's gone. Thank you.
Mr. Flores.
Nothing, Your Honor.
So back in the early 90s, I was an enthusiastic member of the Friends of the Library, primarily because I was friends of the librarian. I got roped into a lot of things. And one of the things I got roped into, in those days, their annual sale was always out here at the mall. And somehow you needed to get about, 5,000 books, from the library to the mall. And it usually involved some hills, and it involved a marvelous old van. It was from KPU. I know it's KPU. It still said KPU on the outside, even though it was the library van. And it kind of was rattly and didn't really function well. And gosh golly, no one else would drive it, especially when it was full of books, because it weighed about, I don't know how many extra tons. It was huge. And I still remember one time driving that van back and forth between the library and the and for some reason this road here was closed or blocked off, so we had to go over the hill and come down Jefferson. And each time I come down Jefferson, the brakes would get a little less significant. On the 9th try, so nine times, I'm coming down the hill, and the brakes refused. I discovered you could stop it by pulling the emergency brake and throwing it in reverse. I kind of did the sideways, thing slide in. And oddly enough, I was just thinking that it actually started up again. I was able to get to but then I refused to drive it back. And ever since then, I've had this sense about these vehicles. I mean, obviously I'm still here, so it worked. But I've always been concerned when I see, staff members, whether it's KPU or anyone else, drive. I mean, we've all seen public works vehicles where you can see the ground. You could literally see the ground. And I think too often we err on the side of, well, let's get another year out of it. And fortunately, up to this point, we haven't lost any city employees or volunteers. But I think it's just always, keep in mind the rolling stock's got to roll. And it's not always the best option to stretch it out. So anyway, with that in mind, we have a motion.
Adjourn.
No,
We have a motion.
We need to defer.
I move to defer until August or December 14th.
I second.
Actually, we need to defer both the general, it's written here.
Oh, sorry.
At the bottom of the page.
I move the city council defer consideration of draft 2023 general government operating and capital budget in the 2023 Ketchikan Public Utilities operating capital budgets till Wednesday, December 14th, 2022.
Second. Move to second discussion. Clerk will call the roll.
Kissler.
Yes.
Bradbury.
Yes.
Gage. Yes. Matani.
Yes.
Gas.
Yes.
Finnegan.
Yes.
Yes. And any motion?
Adjourn.
Now.